Welcome to the Ultimate Deep Web Guide. I am your host, Morgan, creator and teacher over at deepwebacademy.com. I am so excited that you chose to join me in this course to learn more about the deep and dark web. Before we dive into the content of this course, I wanted to give you a brief overview of what you're going to need to actually use the tools properly. So let's go ahead and discuss what you need to use this course. The first thing that you're going to need that is pretty crucial to most of the stuff we do is two 4GB USB drives. And you'll need these to actually run Tails. If you only have one, that's fine for now, but to do it effectively, you're going to want two. And then, of course, you're going to need a computer, and it should have at least 2GB of RAM or more. More is preferred, but if you have at least 2GB of RAM, you should be good. And that computer should also have the availability to boot from a USB drive, so we can boot the Tails operating system. On top of that, you want to make sure you have an internet connection and the ability to download software. There's some software that we'll have to put on our Windows PC, but Tails comes preloaded with everything, but you have to be able to download that as well. And the last thing you need to make sure you can do is actually purchase Bitcoin. This isn't vital to the course, but if you actually want to go through the process of purchasing a product on the darknet markets, you're going to need some Bitcoin. So if you have a little bit of money to purchase some, that would be preferred. If not, that's okay. You can just watch along until you can get that, but it's just preferred for the best experience possible. So if you have all of those things lined up and you think you are ready, go ahead and head to the next video to get a brief overview of the course, and then we will dive into our first section, which is getting hands-on with Tails. So before we dive into the content of the course, it's good to get a brief overview of everything you're going to be learning throughout the Ultimate Deep Web Guide. This course is broken up into 5 main sections. Section 1 will talk about the Tails operating system and its importance in the deep web. Then we'll talk about the Tor proxy and browser, and this comes pre-installed on the Tails operating system as well, so we'll learn how to use it on there and on Windows machines. Then we'll dive into Bitcoin and how it is very important to purchasing products on darknet markets. We'll learn a little bit about PGP encryption, and then after that we will dive into darknet markets. Section 1 will cover all the basics of Tails you need to know. We'll start by going through the setup of Tails on a Windows computer and the setup on a USB drive. We'll show you the initial setup of Tails and the navigation of the interface, and then we'll discuss the importance of encrypted persistence and Tails before learning about how to upgrade your Tails operating system if it's on a USB, and then go through some extra Tails software that's included in the Tails download, but we might not necessarily use in this course. Finally, to round that section up, you will go through a Tails quiz. In Section 2, we'll talk a little bit more about the Tor browser and Tor proxy. We'll start by giving you an intro to the Tor browser and a brief overview of what it is. Then we'll dive into onion routing and learn how onion routing actually encrypts your traffic and makes you secure. Then we'll go through how to set up Tor on a PC device, and we'll go through the interface of Tor once it is set up on a PC and Tails operating system. After that, we'll learn a little bit about Tor bridges and how to configure them on PC and Tails as well. And then we'll discuss Tor nodes and how you can actually run one from your own home. And this section will be rounded out with a Tor quiz to test your knowledge on Tor. In Section 3, we're going to talk about Bitcoin. We're first going to give you an intro to the Bitcoin blockchain and where you are vulnerable in the process. We'll then discuss Bitcoin wallets and Bitcoin purchasing before going into how to transfer Bitcoin anonymously to darknet markets. You'll also take a short Bitcoin quiz after that to ensure you're retaining the information in this section. Section 4 will be the shortest section of the course, and we focus on PGP encryption. We'll go through a basic of why PGP works and what you would even need it for before showing you the setup of PGP on Windows and how to use it on Windows and using PGP on Tails. We don't dive too far into PGP as it can get pretty complicated, and we really only need to know how to encrypt messages to send to somebody. And all of this information we've been learning throughout the first 4 sections will all lead up to this final section where we will cover the information around dark net markets. In this section, we're going to talk about how to actually find and navigate marketplaces. We're going to show you how to verify vendors so you can ensure you're buying safely. And then we'll give you a full tutorial from start to finish on how to actually purchase products from dark net markets. After this video, you'll go through the final quiz to test all your knowledge you learned throughout the course, and then you will be done. So I hope you are excited as I am to go through this information in the course. If you have any questions, again, you can email me directly, morgan@deepwebacademy.com, or you can go to the contact page on the website. See you in the next one. If you easily passed the quiz before this video, you probably don't need to continue on in this section because the rest of the videos are videos taken from the Deep Web 101 course. This course is a different free course offered by Deep Web Academy, and it goes through the basics of all of the tools we talk about throughout this course, like Tails, Tor, Bitcoin, PGP, everything like that. So if you passed that quiz pretty easily, didn't get any wrong, didn't have any questions about it, you probably have a good understanding of the basics, so you can continue on. If you didn't, I would suggest this course as a starter. Otherwise, you can just watch the most important videos from this course in the following few lectures. So head there if you don't have an understanding. Otherwise, continue on in the course and start with the Tor section. Alright, so Tails is the last thing that we'll be talking about in this section 1 of the Deep Web 101 course. Tails is an operating system used to access these tools for the dark web, and you don't necessarily need it to actually access the deep web, but it's very useful because it is super anonymous and does help protect your anonymity and your privacy online. So let's dive into what exactly Tails is. Well, Tails is basically an operating system, just like how Windows is an operating system or the Mac operating system. It's the same general idea, except it's built off of a Linux distribution. And it is very anonymous. Now, that's not too much explanation there, but essentially what it does is it separates your information and keeps your computer hardware safe. And when it's bootable off of a USB drive, and when you actually unplug that USB or SD card, it wipes everything that has happened on that computer. So you can use a computer without anyone actually knowing you ever used the computer in the first place. It's pretty widely used when talking about the deep web or dark web, and it's also highly criticized. Obviously, we talked a little bit about the history behind Tails and how the NSA is definitely against the use or exploration of Tails, as it is pretty secure and goes against what they want in the name of national surveillance. And on top of all those things, it is free, which is great. It's open source. People are allowed to take a look at it and how it runs and be able to use it without having to pay anything. So it's a pretty useful tool when talking about the deep web or the dark web. That's pretty much it when it comes to Tails. There's a lot of resources online about Tails. If you actually want to learn how to use Tails, how to install it, and how to navigate the system, you can go to Deep Web Academy for that. Otherwise, head to the next section of this course where we will be actually talking about Tor and start setting up Tor on our computer so we can use it to explore the deep web. So we've now finished with all the boring videos in this course. It's time to learn some actual useful information that will help us better understand what exactly we'll be doing and how exactly those systems work that we'll be using to access the deep web. In this video, we're going to be talking about the Tor browser, and we're going to get an idea of how the onion routing concept works and how Tor connects you to other people anonymously. So before we dive into understanding how Tor and the Tor network works, we want to first understand the regular internet. Now, when talking about the regular internet, it's often represented as a cloud. However, this isn't really an accurate representation of how connections on the internet work. A better representation of the internet would be a straight line. This line is composed of a lot of things, everything from copper cabling to fiber optics to cell phone towers or even satellite networks. But essentially everything is connected on this one singular line. Now, the internet is useful because it allows two computers, or in this case servers, talk to each other across vast distances very fast. On those servers there, you'll find a hard drive, and on those hard drive, you'll find folders or files, and those are what are transferred between the computers on the internet. Now, each server has its own unique address. Compared to how your home has its own address for mail to get to, every computer or server connected to the internet also has its own address. This is called an IP address. You'll know a website or service by its URL. That would be like www.google.com. However, your computer and your browser and your internet service provider, they all only care about one thing, and that is that IP address, while you may only care about that actual URL. It's important to note also that every URL does have an IP address behind it, connecting it to the internet. So when you're connecting to the internet, the process is pretty straightforward. You can use your computer to connect to www.randomsite.org or .com, or you can use your computer to connect to someone else's computer, and they can use their own computer to connect to Google. It's pretty useful because it just allows people to be interconnected and allows you to send data very fast over vast distances. Now, when connecting to the internet, it's important to note that your computer doesn't actually connect straight to the internet. You first connect to a router at your home, a router or modem if you have one, and that router connects you to your actual internet service provider. This would be like Cox or CenturyLink here in the US. Worldwide, there are obviously many internet service providers, but just pick whichever one you pay your internet bill to, and that's the one that ultimately connects you to the actual internet. From there, your data gets routed where it's supposed to, and it gets what it needs, and then it'll come back through the same way, coming back through your ISP, then your router, and then back to your computer. Now, when information is sent over the internet, it's not sent as one piece, rather piece by piece, and then reassembled on the other side and made sense of. But that's just an overview of the internet. Now we want to see how the Tor browser works, and it uses all of these concepts but adds a spin to each one in the way you connect to the internet. Before we dive into it, let's just clarify exactly what Tor is. Tor is a proxy used to anonymize your communication on the internet. When used with the Tor browser bundle, which is what we'll be using in this course, it is very secure, and together they create the ultimate anonymity tool for browsing the internet. To send all your data over the internet, Tor uses what is called onion routing, which we'll dive a bit into later in this course. And it is the largest tool used in the world to anonymously connect and browse the internet. So it's important to note that, of course, this process of you connecting to your router and then internet service provider is always present. We're going to take out those two steps, though, just to help put more things on the screen. But always note that there isn't a direct connection from your computer to the internet. There's always that middleman in between connecting you to the actual internet. So when connecting using Tor, you don't go straight from your computer to the actual website or dark web service in this case that you're trying to connect to. You go through what are called Tor nodes. So of course you can't directly connect to the dark web service. You'll first have to connect to the Tor servers and download a list of all the available Tor nodes on your network. Your Tor browser or Tor proxy will then use some math to actually figure out which way it will connect, and it'll begin connecting to those nodes one at a time. It'll send your data to the first node, and that first node will then send your data to the second node, and then the second node to the third. There is always a minimum of 3 connections in a Tor network, and they try to always aim for 3 and no more than 3, as any more than 3 or any less can be vulnerable to interception or different flaws. So of course, from your last node, it actually fully connects to the dark web service, and then the data will go all the way back from the dark web service in descending order 3, 2, 1 of the nodes back to your computer. Now, all of these things here are the Tor nodes or Tor services, and they will require that they have special tools on them to let people connect to them or go through them. But you can see here that a Tor node can be anything that is set up to be a Tor node. You can run a Tor node from your house. However, you're not going to be able to actually understand any of the data going through because it is encrypted and protected. So let's look at it in a different way to better understand the concept of connecting to these Tor nodes. Here we have the Tor network, which is comprised of a bunch of different machines that are running themselves as Tor nodes. Obviously, your computer's first step here is to connect to the Tor network and get the latest list of Tor nodes available. And that's a red arrow there representing that your connection to the Tor network is not secure. Your internet service provider or anyone else snooping on your data you're sending can see that you are connecting to the Tor network and understand what you're trying to get. From there, your connection comes back to your computer, and then it begins to enter the Tor network and go to your dark web service. Obviously, the first connection and the last connection into the Tor network are not secure. However, each step of the way is secure to help mitigate any chance of threats coming to you or your computer. Once it goes to the dark web service, that connection will head straight back to your computer in the same fashion and is secured the same way. Now, I'd like to note here that while it was a straight line in the last example, the Tor network can select any path it wants through the nodes. It can go to anyone for first one, anyone for a second one, and anyone for a third one. There's some differences there, though. It can't just enter any node first. The first node does have to be what's called an entry node, and we won't go too much into the specifics behind that, but just know that there are thousands of Tor nodes available across the world, so your connection almost every time will be different and anonymous. Now, looking at the previous example we used of this Tor connection, you can see that there are some pretty big vulnerabilities when it comes to this Tor connection, and that is when you're first entering the network or first exiting the network. This is why even while using Tor, you never want to send personally identifiable information, nothing like your address or name. If you want to be the most secure possible, you shouldn't post anything like that or log in using normal websites or normal email using Tor, because that actually makes you not anonymous and can cause risk to you being found out. And we'll talk a little bit more about how to get around those vulnerabilities, but one of the main ways people use is actually using HTTPS encryption, which is a two-end encryption used on most websites. That's when you look at their the name at the top there and you see that little green lock next to the website name. That just means they're using that encryption type to better secure the data you send. So this way of Tor connecting through different nodes, or connecting your computer through different nodes before getting to its actual destination, is why it's called onion routing, because it adds these layers of encryption. Now, it's not an actual onion. Obviously, it looks more something like this if it was illustrated, and we won't dive too much into how onion routing works or the methods used behind the encryption, because this course, it's only focusing on the basics of these concepts. We don't want to dive too deep into anything too technical, but if you'd like to learn more, of course, there are plenty of other learning and resources on deepwebacademy.com. Hopefully that video sheds some more light on the idea behind Tor and how it connects you anonymously to the internet. In the next video, we're going to be talking about PGP, which I've mentioned a few times in this course. We're going to talk about how that is very important, especially when using Tor if you ever want to send anything that's personally identifiable, like your name, address, or anything else. So go ahead and head to the next video to learn a little bit more about PGP. In this video, we're going to be discussing Bitcoin and learn a little bit how it works under the hood. We're not going to go into too much detail into Bitcoin or how it works. There's a lot of resources online that you can find that teach you everything you need to know about Bitcoin, but we're going to go through and get a basic understanding of the systems involved in Bitcoin. So before we get too far into Bitcoin here, let's be sure we understand what exactly Bitcoin is. In this case, Bitcoin is the most widely used currency for the deep web. That isn't one of its main things that people talk about when talking about Bitcoin, but for our purpose, it is very important to note that. On top of that, Bitcoin is what's called a decentralized cryptocurrency, which just means it's decentralized, not controlled by one central source, and it's crypto, meaning it's on a computer. It's not actual physical money. Bitcoin is useful to purchase things on the deep web or dark web because it's anonymous and fairly easy to use. However, as far as long-term investing in Bitcoin or anything like that, it's highly volatile and always changing in price. So it's not really ever something you want to try to put too much money into without knowing exactly what you are doing. So some people have an issue with Bitcoin because they're used to this. They're used to the physical money, which is backed by banks or governments. But of course, Bitcoin is not backed by a bank or government. It's backed by the people, and the people say how much it's worth, and that is what gives it its value. Now, normal money, a bank or a government will just tell you what that money is worth, and then you just come to accept that. And Bitcoin works differently because it's not one central source. It's everyone involved in the Bitcoin process who actually determines the price of Bitcoin. And a lot of people argue, Bitcoin's on the computer, so how can it be worth anything when it has nothing physical behind it to back it up? There's no actual Bitcoin you can hold in your hand. And this can be confusing for some people, but the analogy I like to use to kind of clear this up is, if you have ever used a credit card or a debit card, it works in the same way. That's not physical money. It's just a piece of plastic that says you have money on there, and it is still accepted because the value on that card could be turned into actual money. And just like that card could be turned into money, Bitcoin could also be turned into real money, which is essentially what gives it value. The process of how Bitcoin works is fairly simple. Bitcoin at its core is simply just a ledger. And this ledger contains names and the balance of those people, and that's how it keeps track of what Bitcoin is out there and who has what amount of Bitcoin. Now, say two people wanted to trade Bitcoin for a item or service. Once they did this trade, the ledger would update and then it would reflect their balances accordingly. Now, all these transactions on Bitcoin are protected by what's called a signature, and it's kind of a handshake between users that actually authenticates the transaction. This signature is useful because someone random couldn't just try to update the ledger and say, hey, I traded 100 Bitcoins with Cindy. Because they all have this signature, which are created by your own actual Bitcoin wallet, and this signature is different every time. And mathematically speaking, it's impossible to get the same signature twice ever. So it's what keeps it secure and what keeps it unique. So we talked about how Bitcoin is a ledger, but obviously one person doesn't have this ledger. If you run a Bitcoin mining node or you participate in Bitcoin mining, you will have a copy of this ledger. And so that means a lot of people around the entire world have this copy. And basically what will happen is one of the ledgers gets updated because there was a transaction made. And then that ledger will broadcast to the rest of the network that a change has been made, and they will all update their ledgers accordingly, assuming, of course, that the signature checked out and everything was good on that end. Now, you don't have to be a part of this whole ledger system to actually trade Bitcoin. You could still trade Bitcoin freely without partaking in any of the Bitcoin mining or managing, being what's called a super user for Bitcoin. You don't have to do any of that. You could buy and sell Bitcoin freely without taking care of handling a ledger or anything like that. So that's just a basic idea of Bitcoin. We didn't dive too deep into it, of course, because it can get very technical very fast, and we want to avoid getting too in-depth into Bitcoin because that's not what this course is focusing on. Hopefully this gave you a basic understanding of what exactly Bitcoin is and why it's more anonymous than regular money. You can see here it's more anonymous because it's managed by a bunch of people, not by any corporations or governments. And obviously we were talking about this ledger earlier before, but these ledgers are not, they don't actually have your name and your balance. They more have what's called your wallet ID, and that wallet ID is going to be a long string of numbering characters. So it doesn't have anything that's actually attached to you, and you don't need any specific credentials to open up a Bitcoin wallet, which is why people tend to like it, because it's fairly anonymous in that way. So hopefully that gave you a better understanding. If you have any more questions about Bitcoin, I urge you to just hit Google and kind of look up some of the things about Bitcoin. There's a lot of great videos and learning resources out there. And we'll dive a little bit more into Bitcoin in some of the other courses on Deep Web Academy, but we won't go too in depth in this one. So that does it for this video. In the next video, we're going to give you a brief introduction to Tails, the Tails operating system, which we've mentioned before in this course. And then after that, we're going to start wrapping things up and actually get into hands-on use with Tor and start exploring the deep web. Alright, so far throughout this course, you've probably heard me mention PGP a few times, and you're wondering what exactly PGP is. In the last video where we talked about Tor and how the Tor network works, I mentioned how there's major vulnerabilities in actually connecting with the Tor network, and that if you send any private information over this Tor network, that information is actually not secure, and people can figure out some personally identifiable information about you if you were to send it. This is where PGP comes in handy. Now, PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy, and it is a way to encrypt messages online. It's not used only for messages, though. PGP can also be used to encrypt emails, text, files, and pretty much anything else that can be sent over the internet. It is the main tool used to encrypt messages and files over the dark web, and it was first created in 1991, but since has been perfected. And currently to the public, it is the closest known tool that can get you military-grade encryption. You can't quite get to that military-grade encryption because those are guarded secrets, but this is definitely a close second because no supercomputer in the world could break this encryption as long as you follow the steps accordingly. So let's take a look at two people in the next example here to better understand PGP. We'll be using Zach and Rob for these examples. Now, Zach and Rob want to send a message over the internet, and they want to make sure nobody can see it. So how would this process work for Rob to be able to send Zach his message without somebody on the internet spying and be able to open and read the message if they were to intercept it? Well, in that case, of course, Rob and Zach would want to use PGP to encrypt the message before sending it. Before diving deeper, it's important to note that Rob and Zach should obviously have a computer, access to the internet, and PGP software installed and ready to go on their computer. Now, we'll write out the process first before we actually visualize the process so you can gain a better understanding of what exactly it all entails. And it's 5 basic steps to actually encrypt a message using PGP. First, Zach would have to create a public and private key using his PGP software. And even though it's Rob who wants to send the message, Zach would first have to create a public and private key. He would then share his public key with Rob, ensuring he keeps his private key safe. And then Rob would take the public key he got from Zach and encrypt the message he wants to actually send to Zach. And then, of course, he would send the message over. Zach would decrypt the message using the private key he ensured he kept safe. So let's look at the process with some illustration to get a better understanding. Of course, Rob has his message that he wants to send to Zach, and Zach has to first create that private and public key, ensuring that he keeps that private key safe. He would then send a copy, a symmetric copy, over to Rob, and Rob would use that symmetric copy of the public key to actually encrypt the message. He would then send that message over the internet to Zach, and Zach could open it up and read it. Now, if anyone on the internet were to intercept that message, they would just see a bunch of jumbo in there and wouldn't be able to understand the message at all. If they did get a hold of Zach's private key, though, and knew it was a message to him, they would be able to open it and read it, but at this point, it would be illegible to anyone that reads it. This is the basic process of PGP. It's not very complicated, but it is good to note that there is a public and private key, and that the public key can be shared with anyone you want to send you a message. However, that private key is supposed to be kept for you and you only. If anyone gets a hold of that, they can decrypt any messages that were encrypted using that public key that was created with that private key. That is a very basic understanding of PGP, and throughout this course we won't really go any more in depth into PGP or how to use it. If you want to learn more about that, of course there are more learning resources on Deep Web Academy, and you can just search online as well to find better ways to use and actually encrypt messages with PGP. In the next video, we'll be talking about Bitcoin and the important role it plays in the dark web, and we'll actually understand how this idea of Bitcoin works when it's not even actually physical money. So if you want to learn a little bit more about Bitcoin, head on to the next video, and I'll see you there. Alright, welcome to the first video in the hands-on with Tails section. In this video, we're going to give you a basic introduction to Tails so you can understand what it is and why we want to use it with the deep web. So to start out, let's answer the big question, what is Tails? Tails is essentially a free operating system based on the Debian GNU Linux distribution. So it's a Linux-based operating system. It uses Tor for all its internet connection when you're using it, so you are very secure online. It comes with state-of-the-art cryptographic tools that you can use in various things, and it leaves no trace on the host computer. This one is important because Tails can be stored on a USB, SD card, or DVD, and you can pretty much put it in any computer, even a computer at work, or even a computer at the NSA headquarters, and essentially they cannot detect that you ever use that computer for anything. So if you ever needed to get around certain censorship on the computer, you could use something like this to get around that. Also, Tails is useful because it keeps no information upon shutdown. So you unplug that USB or take out that SD card, it'll erase everything you just did and keep no record of it. And as of today, it's one of the best tools for online anonymity and security. But Tails is not perfect. There are some warnings you need to know about before using Tails and becoming familiar with it. It's important to remember that Tails is a work in progress. It is not perfect. There are definitely going to be some flaws in it, and while it's still relatively new, they are making a lot of progress with it, and a lot of great tools are coming out of it. So the first thing you need to be aware of is Tails doesn't protect you against compromised hardware. If the computer you're using Tails on has something installed on it that could track or figure out you're using Tails, it can't protect against that. It doesn't protect against BIOS or firmware attacks, and while those are a little more complicated, it still will not stop those from happening. Also, since it does use Tor for the internet connection, there are some vulnerabilities with Tor, which we will discuss in the next section, but you should be aware that Tor is not perfect either. And if you do create any documents with Tails and end up saving them or sending them, your metadata of who created it, the basic operating system it was created on, things like that, will be kept on the document. So that is important to note. And most of the time, your internet provider can see that you're using Tor and probably see you're using Tails as well. Unless you add like a Tor bridge or a VPN in the way, it's going to be discovered that you're using Tor and Tails. So if you're comfortable with knowing those things and think you can navigate around them, let's see what you need to actually get running with Tails. So the basic items you will need are a computer and two 4GB USB drives. You can use Tails on SD cards or DVDs. However, USB is the easiest way as it can be upgraded, changed, and a lot of people have USBs instead of SDs, so that's the preferred way to go. Now, if you don't have any USBs or maybe don't have a computer you want to use Tails on, you can just have a computer and VirtualBox. VirtualBox is a free program available online that will let you simulate the Tails environment on your computer. While this is not effective for security, it's a good way to kind of get a feel for Tails before you actually boot it up on your computer, since when you boot up Tails, you won't have access to your normal desktop or anything like that. And throughout this course, we'll be showing you the USB portion. However, for most of the recording, we will be on the VirtualBox to make it easier for me to record and edit these videos. So be sure you have some of those things before continuing, either two USB drives in a computer or just VirtualBox in a computer. Now, the computer does not really matter as long as you do have like a USB port, and generally a good rule of thumb is it needs to have at least 2 GB of working memory or RAM. If it doesn't have at least 2, Tails can run into some problems and bugs. So at least 2 GB of RAM and obviously the ability to boot from a USB drive. So if you have those things, you can head on to the next lecture where we will be going through how to install Tails on a VirtualBox on a Windows desktop environment. And after that, we will learn how to use Tails on an actual USB drive. See you there. Alright, in this lecture we're going to go ahead and install Tails on our computer using VirtualBox. This is useful because you can actually boot up Tails on your normal desktop, in this case the Windows desktop environment, and you can get used to it and get a feel for it before you actually boot from a USB to the Tails operating system. It's important to note though that if you plan to do anything like on darknet markets or just anything digging into the deep web a little bit, you don't really want to use it on a VirtualBox because it's not as secure as Tails would be on its own. It'll have a lot of security issues and a lot of things you don't want to mess with. So this is good for practicing and getting a feel for the environment, but for anything that your security should be taken seriously, I would not use Tails in a VirtualBox environment. But we'll go ahead and continue over to the desktop to take a look at the Tails with VirtualBox. So back on the desktop over here, we've opened up a web browser, just a normal Mozilla Firefox browser, and the first thing we want to do to actually get this is get VirtualBox. So we'll go ahead and just type that in here, and we'll just do a basic Google search, and you can do the first one not the add. If you want to do the add, same thing, but we'll hit this one. It'll pull up the VirtualBox page, and then we will look at downloading it over here. And then we'll do a Windows host because we are on a Windows machine. Of course, if you are on a Mac, use the OS X, or Linux, use Linux. But we'll save the file. It'll take a minute to download, so we will skip to when it is done. Alright, so the download is just starting to finish now. So once it is downloaded, we will go ahead and run the file so we can actually get to install VirtualBox. So it should pull up with a normal screen like this, and you just click run. And of course, if you are on a Mac, it will look a tad different, and there are a lot of documentation on the Mac desktop using this. I use Windows just because Windows is more widely used. So just keep hitting next. We'll install all of these, pretty much everything you want with it. And there we go. And we'll go ahead and let it install. It should only take a moment, so we'll go ahead and let that happen, and we will be back once it is done. Alright, and it finished up here, so we'll go ahead and launch it right now. We'll hit finish and let it load up. It'll take a moment here. Alright, so that has finally finished and booted up. So here it is. Basically, this is the whole entire screen. Not much to it. We'll go through the setting up of Tails, but we do need one more thing, and that is actually getting Tails. So we open up a tab over here, and you can go to tails.boum.org, and that's where you will find the download for Tails. And you can just kind of hit this giant install Tails button. We just want to download only. We don't want to do this whole thing. So we will want to download using a torrent client if you have one. So we can go ahead and do that and download the torrent file. I use Deluge for my torrent software, one of the best ones I think. So if you have that, or you can download it without doing a torrent, although it will just take a lot longer. So we'll open this up in our torrent download system, and should only be a second till it pulls up. And here it is now. Go ahead and let it boot up. Duplicate torrent, I already had that. Alright, so now we got Tails added here, and it's going to go ahead and start downloading. It's a pretty large file, just over a gig, so depending on your internet speed, it may take a while to download. So go ahead and just give it its time and let it download. Alright, so that download finished here, so we'll go ahead and stop it to make sure that it doesn't keep seeding, so it doesn't use up my internet while we record this. And then we'll go ahead and hop back over to the VirtualBox. I'll actually double check where it saved. I believe it was just under my downloads. Let's see. Yeah, just right there. So we'll go ahead and go over to the VirtualBox. We'll start by clicking on the new, and then we'll name it. We can name it Tails. You want to set the type to be Linux, and then the version will be Other Linux 32-bit. And the memory size you can allocate from your machine based off of what you have. So obviously 1,000 megabytes is 1 gigabyte of RAM. It's recommended you do at least 2. This computer only has about 4 on it, so it'll definitely be sucking it up. I'm going to do, I'll make it a nice even 2. Just about. So we'll select that, and then on this part you don't want to have a virtual hard disk in this part, so click the do not add virtual hard disk and go ahead and click create. So it'll say it is done, but at this point it's not actually connected to anything, so we will want to add the CD. So we'll go to the settings, and once that loads up you'll go to System, and in the enhanced features area you want to make sure that you enable the IO API-C, and then from the storage pane on the left hand side select the empty controller right here, the controller IDE in the storage tree. So you'll then want to go ahead and select this CD icon, which will help you choose a virtual disk file. And you'll want to go to your Tails and go and hit that, hit open, and make sure to select the live CD/DVD option, and we'll go and hit OK. And assuming everything was correct, we can go ahead and start this VirtualBox. It'll take a moment to boot up, but once it does, hopefully it has Tails running. We will see if we did it correctly. So I'm going to pause right now while it boots up. It'll take a moment and we'll be back when it's up. Okay, and it looks like it did start here. It'll come up in a separate window, and it looks like this is the actual Tails operating system. So there's two options at the start there. Just select the normal Tails, and we just want to get it booted up to verify that it is all working correctly. But we'll go through the normal startup process in the next one here. There may be some errors as it boots up just because you are running it on a VirtualBox. You can ignore most of those. None of those are really going to be critical to running the system. So let's see here while it loads. Hopefully it all is done correctly. And while this is loading, I'm just going to go ahead and close out some of the programs I have left open just to help give it some more memory here to work with. Keep this open. And we will just wait while it loads up. Alright, so it is finally booted up here, and now we can expand the screen and take a look at our options. At this point, we know Tails has been installed correctly and is working, so there's not much we need to do. In the next section, we'll go through the installation process on a USB, and then after that, we'll get hands-on with this Tails desktop, and I'll show you the ropes on what you need to use and the differences in the software and installation and using Tor and all of that. So head to the next section if you want to learn more about installing Tails on a USB drive. So now that we've gone through how to install Tails on a VirtualBox environment on a Windows desktop, it's now time to talk about how to install Tails using USB drives. This is the preferred method of installing Tails. You can install Tails on a DVD or SD card. However, we won't cover those in this course. You can find those resources online to learn how to do that. But in this one, we're going to be using USB drives. Now, if you really do want to get the true anonymity and security from Tails, you have to use the USB drives, or SD or DVD, any one of those three. But you can't be using it in like a VirtualBox environment. It has some serious issues with security that you will not be able to avoid if you're trying to do anything more than basic stuff on the deep web. So be sure you're following this guide closely. For the next part of this section, we're going to hop back over to the desktop and go through the installation process of Tails on a USB drive. So back over here on the desktop, we're going to start by using our browser to go to the Tails website again, and that is just that tails.boum.org. And just like we did in the last lecture, we're going to hit over to this right-hand side on where it says Install Tails. And we're going to go ahead and just follow this Tails Installation Assistant guide. Instead of hitting that download only, we'll just follow this. So let's go ahead and start the journey. We're going to be installing Tails from Windows. So if you have other systems you're installing it from, you can use that. Otherwise, select the Windows option. And then we're going to want to go ahead and select the right-hand side here where it says Install from Windows. And you can see you're going to need 2 USB sticks, at least 4 gigabytes. It'll take a full hour to download Tails, depending on your internet connection, of course. And to get the full install, they say about an hour, but a little less than that. You can also see the literature here on how to get Tails on a DVD or how to run Tails in a virtual machine like we did in the last lecture. So we'll go ahead and select this Install from Windows option, and it will walk us through the basics of the installation. So obviously we have already downloaded the file for the Tails system. It's here in our downloads under Tails. You can see we have the ISO there. That's really all you need to download. So if you already have that from the last lecture, you're good to go. But if you don't, you will need to download it again. And now that we have Tails downloaded, we will go ahead and get a USB installer to make a bootable USB. This one is a universal USB installer. I'm not going to actually use that one. The one I'm going to use that is a little easier to use is called Rufus. So you can just Google search Rufus if you want to find that. It'll be that first one there. And we'll pull that up and get to this. And here on the screen, we'll just scroll down to download, and I will just hit this 2.14. I actually hit the portable one. That way you can actually carry it around with you if you want to have a USB drive maker, a bootable USB drive maker. Rufus is pretty great at that, so we'll download it really quickly and then we'll run it once it is downloaded. And we'll say yes there. And then we'll just continue to follow the guide. Now you can download this one and just follow their guide if you would like. Really no difference in this part for creating the drive and getting it together. So once we have this download created, we are creating what's called an intermediate Tails, or intermediary Tails. So we will actually install another Tails. We can read through the rest of the instructions really quickly just so you know what we will be doing. So these instructions you will have to print or otherwise save, because once you reboot your computer and plug in the USB, you won't have this web page. Then we'll start up the Tails and it'll start normally. We'll go into it and then we'll actually install. We'll actually use the install by cloning button to get it finalized. So let's open up our Rufus here, and then we will go ahead and plug in our USB to get that all ready. So I have my USB plugged in now. You'll see under the device it should automatically detect your device plugged in. This one is already named Tails because I have put Tails on it before. You can leave the file system on exFAT, or if you want to change it, it doesn't really matter. I'll actually change it back to the default. I wouldn't really mess with any of these, and you can change the name of it as well. I like naming it Tails. And you will have to create a bootable disk. You want to make sure you notice this area and select that little disk icon. And from there, you're going to actually go to your downloads and get the Tails ISO. Open that up. And it should have it all ready all together. And if you are ready, and make sure you have saved any files off that USB if there are any, as this will erase them all, you can go ahead and hit start. Sometimes it comes up with that screen saying it needs to install some extra things, so we'll just go ahead and say yes. Saying it'll clear the drive, we'll say okay, and then it will begin installing Tails. It'll take a moment, but it shouldn't be too long here. And basically, once that is done, you can follow the rest of this. We're not going to actually go through it because doing it and trying to record it is kind of impossible, because you can't really record the Tails desktop that easily. So really all you need to do is you boot it up on your computer, and then you go just follow the instructions, application Tails installer, and just install by cloning. Now technically, your Tails would be fine if you just plugged it in and ran it from that one USB stick. You don't need to get a second one, but this just ensures your Tails is actually the right Tails and is safe. Sometimes if you were victim to like a man-in-the-middle attack or something like that, they could send you a copy of Tails that actually isn't verified and that has tracking software somewhere in it or something like that. So I mean, if you verify your download, if you know how to check the hash on it or the checksum of it all, you can actually use that to verify your download. Otherwise you can use this method. But even if you skipped this, while it's not recommended, your Tails is still working normally. It's not like this step is required. So after you get that first one done, which it is almost done creating, you plug it into your computer and you'll need to boot from the USB. How you do that is different per computer, so you'll need to look it up. Usually while it's booting up, you press like F10 or F12, something like that, or even delete maybe. Depends on the type of computer you have, but you can just Google that really quickly. Just Google the type of your computer and then how to boot from USB. And once you've done that, you basically have Tails on a USB drive. Now if you ever want to upgrade your USB drive or upgrade your Tails, you could do it through this area on Tails, but we will talk about that a little bit later in this course. But other than that, that's the basics of installing Tails on a USB. Not terribly complicated. If you have any questions about this whole process, I recommend just going to their website. They have a lot of documentation on how to install it and some issues you might come into while installing it. So just follow these guides. They're very good, lots of pictures, very easy to understand. So if you have any questions or any issues, just head over to this tails.boehm.org. Otherwise, go ahead and head to the next lecture where we will go through the initial setup of Tails and get you familiar with the desktop and navigating around the system. So hopefully at this point you have Tails set up and ready to go on your computer, whether you're using it in a VirtualBox or on a USB drive. For this next section, we're going to go through the initial setup of Tails, give you a basic introduction to the interface and some of the tools there. And after that, we'll talk a little bit about encrypted persistence volumes and why they are important. So for this next section, we're going to hop back over to the desktop to our VirtualBox and continue from there. All right, back over here on the desktop, we have our VirtualBox pulled up. So if everything is still set up correctly, we'll go ahead and just hit this start button, and it should begin to boot the machine. Now, depending on your computer speed, it can take a minute to boot, so just be patient with it. However, if you are using this through the USB, it should be a lot quicker booting up. Pulled up on the other screen here, we'll throw it on this side, and there it is. To give you two options here at the beginning, it defaults to the normal Tails option, so that's the one you will want to use. The troubleshooting option is a bit more advanced, and unless you really know what you're doing, I wouldn't mess too much with that. We'll go ahead and just let it load. It is going to take a moment, so I'll go ahead and pause it until it is ready to go. Alright, and it finally did boot up, so now you can see the welcome screen for Tails, and we'll go ahead and go through some of the options it gives you on the startup. Now, of course, you don't need to mess with any of these options if you're not comfortable with using them, or you don't want them, or you could just select no and hit login. Otherwise, hit yes and then hit forward, and that'll bring us to the extra options screen. The first one you can have here is the administrator password. This will allow you, of course, to put a password on the Tails, so you can lock people out. This is specifically useful when you have a persistence volume on your Tails application, and this just means that you can actually save data, because by default Tails won't save any documents you create or anything like that. However, if you have a persistence volume, it would save anything you put in there. So that can be useful for certain reasons like that. The next one we have here is MAC address spoofing. MAC address spoofing is useful for a few reasons, but it should be avoided as well for certain reasons. So generally, a MAC address is just it's like an IP address, except for it's based off of the hardware. So every device has a unique MAC address. In your home, obviously, if a computer connects to your internet, then disconnects, and then a different computer connects to the internet, they could have the same IP. However, they will never have the same MAC address. A MAC address is unique for every single one. So MAC address spoofing would be useful for a couple of different reasons. Say you're using your own computer on a public network and you don't have registration and don't have to actually log into anything, then this would be useful to just go right in. That way you can hide the fact that you're using your computer. On top of that, if you're using your own computer on a network that you use frequently, like a friend's house or at work or at university, and you have a strong relationship with that internet and your MAC address from your computer, you'll definitely want to spoof it just at this time and then go back to running it normally, and that will hide the fact that you're using Tails on this network. So the fact that you use Tails isn't hooked to your original MAC address. But you wouldn't want it on all of the time. Sometimes you wouldn't want to spoof your MAC address. Say you're using a public computer like internet cafe or library. If this computer is usually on the network and its MAC address changes, in some cases it'll make it look suspicious, and other cases it won't work at all. So it's important to remember that some networks limit access to certain MAC addresses. So that could definitely be a reason you wouldn't want to spoof it. And above and beyond that, using your own computer at home, you wouldn't really want to spoof your MAC address there. Your computer is already associated to the network, so MAC address spoofing for this situation is pretty much useless. But if you access your local network, if the access to your local network is restricted based on MAC addresses, it would be impossible to connect, so it definitely wouldn't work at all, so you wouldn't want it. But generally, it's useful to do, so you definitely want to use it if you ever plan to do anything illegal or illicit using the dark web. You definitely want to spoof your MAC address. And the next setting here allows you to basically set up a proxy. So if you need to set up a proxy to even connect to the normal internet, or for some reason they block Tails in your country or something, or block Tor in your country, that is, or something like that, you would actually need to configure the computer with a VPN, which you could select on here and then go log in, and you'll do all the settings like that. But if you're comfortable with how all these settings are, you can finally hit that login button and it will boot up to the main screen. We will go ahead and let it load up. It should only take a moment here, but of course this computer is not the fastest computer, which I did just to keep it kind of realistic to your situation. Nobody really has, or not everybody has, a super fast gaming desktop or something like that they can use for these kind of things. And I wouldn't recommend using your personal computer for Tails at all, if possible. But we'll go ahead and just let this load. I'll pause the video for now and we'll be back once it is done. Perfect, so the Tails desktop has finally loaded and now we are here. So this is the basic desktop. We'll kind of walk you through everything you need to know or see about this. One of the first things that came up is I had 3 messages, but we won't care about those right now. So the main things you should be aware is it is a pretty user-friendly interface. You can obviously click and drag items if you want. They don't really move freely, but remember, any changes you make once you unplug, they will go away. So the first thing you'll want to check out is the applications area. If you hit this little drop down, you'll see a lot of different options in terms of applications that come preloaded on Tails. You have some of the favorites, which is like the Tor browser, iStove, which is or iStove, I guess you would say, is a email client similar to Thunderbird, except it supports PGP. You have Pigeon Internet Messenger, which is an instant messenger, and you can actually configure it with OTR, or off-the-record messaging, so it would not keep track of you at all. You have KeePass, which will actually store your keys made when you are doing the PGP process, which we'll talk about a little bit later. And then you have the terminal, which you can actually run commands through. And those are the main ones we'll be discussing. Obviously, you have accessories like calculator, files. Obviously, you have some graphic ones you can do like Inkscape, GNU, LibreOffice. Under the internet, some important ones on here. Obviously, Electrum is very important. That's the Bitcoin wallet we're going to be using. And pretty much other than that, I mean, you could take a look at all of these. A lot of preloaded software and all of this stuff is safe to use on here and is considered very private and set up to work with Tails. So it's not bad to do. Then other than that, you have your places option here, which really gets you to navigate around the file system, so much like Windows Explorer does, something like that. You can go to your documents and take a look at what documents you have in there, or your downloads, or anything like that. We'll kind of exit out of that then, and that's pretty much the places option. Now moving on to the right hand side, there's some interesting things over here. The first one is this actual keyboard. This is a virtual keyboard, and this just helps protect you against keyloggers, especially hardware keyloggers that can track which keys you press, because even with Tails booted up, they'll probably still track them. So this is useful in that case. Next to it here, you have the OpenPGP applet. This is where you can encrypt and decrypt messages with your, or your public key, I should say, and then decrypt them with your private key. So you can see that very quick way to just kind of type something out and then copy it and encrypt it. Other than that, you have the little onion, which is actually the Tor browser, so we can hit that and just open a Tor circuit. It will actually open the Tor browser. We hit that keyboard there. Let's see, and you can just see here it gives us the option for which circuit to hit and all that, so we'll go ahead and just close that for now. We won't be messing with any of that. Another option here are more of the universal access options, so you can change some basic settings in Tails, high contrast, zoom, large text, the screen reader, things like that to help with accessibility and usability. And then over here we also have keyboard layouts, so this is going to change how your keyboard types. And then you have the time over here. This little box, if it will press on it here, is actually the information. It's actually this whole bar. So you have your sound, and then you have your you could see if it's charging or not, what status your battery has, and then you'll actually see your Wi-Fi up here once you connect to internet and everything like that. So that's basically the Tails desktop. I know it's kind of a brief overview, but there's not that much to take a look at or know about. It's pretty intuitive, definitely user-friendly, so shouldn't be too hard to navigate. In the next section, we're going to talk about the actual configuration of a persistence volume, so that way you can actually save files in here and you don't just make documents that get erased. And you can see under this section where I hit the settings option, lots of options under there. It's based off of a Linux distro, but you can see if you use a Mac, it kind of looks very similar to the way a Mac is laid out as well. So other than that, there's not much to know about the interface of Tails. We'll definitely need to get comfortable with setting up a persistence volume so you can save some of these files that you'll be creating or using, especially things like your public and private keys for your PGP applet. You'll definitely want to be able to save those. Other than that, of course, if you have any more questions about this, you can just head to the Tails website. They have great documentation on each of these different applications and the user interface and how it works and how to navigate it. If you are comfortable with the interface and feel like you have a pretty good handle on Tails, head to the next video lecture where we will talk about creating persistence volumes, after which we'll actually get hands-on with using some of these applications, some of the ones we won't use commonly. I'll just give you a rundown of how they work and what they're used for. And then after that, we should be closing up our section on Tails and starting into learning about Tor, the Tor browser, and onion routing. So now that we've gone through the basic setup of Tails, it's time to dive into persistence volumes so you can get a better understanding of what they are. We talked about it a little before in previous lectures. The idea behind a persistence volume is the ability to actually save files on the Tails operating system. By default, if you create any documents or create anything inside of the Tails operating system, the second you remove that USB or that SD card, once you shut down Tails, all of that work you had will be erased. This is useful for privacy and security reasons. However, if you are saving things like personal keys for your PGP application, or you have your Bitcoin wallet configured and already ready, you don't necessarily want to delete all of that every time, especially if you use Tails often. So in this video lecture, we're going to go through the basics of setting up encrypted persistence. To start, we're going to jump over to the Tails website and take a look at some of the documentation, and then we will go from there. So let's hop over to the desktop. And back here over on the desktop, we have a Firefox window pulled up onto the Tails website. We are at the screen where we initially were installing Tails from. It gives us the walkthrough and instructions. And actually, if you go all the way down to option number 6, you'll see a handy guide based around encrypted persistent storage. So this is basically what you will need to follow along with. The process of creating one is fairly simple. All you have to do is pull up Tails, choose Applications, Tails, and then configure persistence volume. So we'll go over to our VirtualBox here and give that a shot. Once it logs in, we'll go ahead and go to Applications, Tails, and then configure persistence volume. And it should take a second to pull up here. And you'll see actually when we pull it up on the VirtualBox, we'll get an error that says Tails is running from non-USB, non-SDIO device. And that is because we are using it on the VirtualBox. So if we had been running it from a USB, we could go ahead and create the persistence volume. It's very simple. All you do is ask you for a passphrase. You'll create a passphrase and verify the passphrase and then hit create. And then you'll see there's an assistant that shows you the list of possible persistent features and all of that. And of course, if you have any questions for persistence, you can hit the Tails website. But it's not fairly complicated to create. You'll notice that once you actually boot up Tails, you'll see some other options. Basically, it'll ask if you want to use your persistence volume or not. If you do, just select yes, and you can hit login, and the rest will be the same. Now, you can actually save your personal files. You'll have to save them in the right spot. You can see you'll want to save them in the persistent folder, and this is under places and persistent. So if we had it in this one here, it'd be places, and then persistent would be down here. I believe it goes right here or here. And that would pretty much be it for persistence. Super important. You'll definitely want to configure that as we go throughout the rest of this course. I will not have it, but that's okay because I can't really get it on the VirtualBox, and recording on the USB is not as easy. So we won't have it for our videos, but you should have it because you will be needing it to use some of these features we'll be talking about later throughout the course, like using the PGP applet to send messages and setting up your Bitcoin wallet and getting Bitcoin to it and everything like that. So if you have questions on persistence, head to the Tails website. And generally, if you have any questions about Tails, I would definitely head to this website. But overall, that is all we're going to be talking about with Tails when it comes to installation and use. We have one more lecture left here on the Tails section where we will give you a rundown of some of the software included in Tails, just kind of what it is, how you can use it, and then we'll go through our most important software and what we're going to be using later throughout this course. So if you have any other questions for Tails, I would definitely recommend you hit this website up, the tails.boehm.org. So much documentation on there. Very well spelled out. Obviously, these are very easy to understand instructions on installation and upgrading SSDs and creating storage devices, everything like that. So if you have any questions about Tails, I suggest heading to their website. Otherwise, you can head to the next video where we're going to talk about using some of the software included on Tails, what they are, how to use them, and then we'll talk about our main software we will want to use throughout this course. So if you believe you have a good understanding of Tails persistence or have it set up, go ahead and head to the next lecture to get started on using other Tails software. Alright, welcome to the last video in the Tails section of the Ultimate Deep Web Guide course. In this video, we're going to be going through some of the software available on Tails and why it is useful, and we'll also give you a rundown of the ones you really need to be sure you know how to use because they are going to be the most common ones you interact with. So for the rest of this video, we're going to go back over on our Tails desktop, which is in our virtual box, and get started there. Back on our Tails desktop here, we're going to go ahead and start by going to the applications area at the top left. And you can see from the start some of the most important applications you will use on Tails. Of course, the Tor browser is a very important one, and you can even hit that to get that started and running. Some of the other important ones are IceDove, which is an email client but supports PGP. You have the Pigeon Internet Messenger, which is instant messaging. You have KeePass X, which is used for actual storing PGP keys and creating and configuring them. And then you have your terminal, of course, which is just used to execute commands. If you know anything about Linux terminals, that's why that would be useful. So these are some of the main ones which we will go through in this course, so you don't really need to be too familiar with them. We'll go ahead and head to our accessories. Oh, and there's our Tor browser finally booting up. Does take a minute. We'll actually let it run really quickly. In the next section, we'll give you a rundown of what everything means on here. All of these different buttons, what they mean. You should have a basic idea if you took that Deep Web 101 course already, but if not, you'll definitely get another rundown in this course, but we'll go ahead and close that for now. And we'll head to some accessories and give you a rundown of some of these. So some of these are pretty basic, obviously a calculator, files. One you might be not so sure of is the gedit. So it did pull up here. This gedit is just basically a text editor for the GNOME desktop environment, which is what Tails essentially runs off of. So all it is a standard text editor. Obviously you can put stuff in here, things like that, nothing too crazy there. So continuing on to our applications here, you also have the GTK hash application, which is actually used for checking the checksums. It supports hash functions for MD5, MD6, SHA-1, SHA-256, all of those ones. If you're familiar with any of that, that's what it would be used for. Under graphics, we have some other things like GNU Image, which is just an image, basically like a, I guess you could compare it to like Microsoft Paint. You have Inkscape, which is similar to that as well. We'll actually pull that up, take a look at it really quickly. I don't use this almost at all, if ever. I don't think I've used this almost ever. So I'm interested to see exactly what it is. But we'll let it pull up here. We'll go through some more while it's pulling up. Under graphics, so we had that LibreOffice Draw, which again is kind of like a paint thing. the Scribus, and then Simple Scan as well. Under the Internet section, we have a few more things, a little bit more useful things. We have our Electrum Bitcoin wallet, very useful. So here an Inkscape did pull up, so it's basically just a looks like a drawing platform. You could actually create stuff if you would like. But we'll go ahead and close that out. Under applications, back under Internet, we have the Electrum Bitcoin wallet, like we said. And then we have Gabi, this is an editor which supports like multiple documents in one sessions, and you can have a multi-user chat. So it's like several people can work on something at once, so pretty useful. Then we have, of course, iStuff, which we talked about. It's an email client, secure email client. We have the Liferea, which we'll actually pull that one up. And this platform is basically just a feed reader, so a news aggregator. You can see a bunch of different news articles and things like that from different networks. So pretty cool there. Also under here we have the Onion Circuits, Onion Share, all have to do with Tor, which we'll talk about in the next section. We also have an unsafe browser if you really want to use that, although I wouldn't see any reason to. Then if you go under Office, this is basically like your Microsoft Office or Microsoft Office. So you got your LibreOffice Calc, which is kind of like Excel, the Draw, which is kind of like Paint, Impress, which is a little bit like Photoshop, and then you have the Math and then the Writer as well, which is kind of like Word. Under Programming, you have the Poedit, which is basically like a text editor again, but for code, so more of a sandbox environment. Under Science, you have the LibreOffice Math. Under Sounds and Videos, you have a bunch of different things on here. These are just sound recorders. Audacity, which is just, again, a sound recorder. And you can actually create videos and things like that. So for some of the videos in the future, we'll be using some of these tools to record the desktop, although there's not really built-in desktop recording that's that great. This is more of video editing and things like that. And then under System Tools, we can find some basic stuff, our persistent volume settings, basic settings, and then actual programs like that. We don't want to go into too much detail about any of those. And then the Tails, we've gone through that a little bit on what's in there. Universal Access, which is more just a better way of understanding the desktop and configuring all of that. And then Utilities, of course, the basics, the System Monitor, password and keys, disks, archive manager, everything like that. So not too many difficult applications. I definitely recommend if you want to try any out, just go ahead and give them a shot, use them, see what they're about. The best thing about Tails is these come all pre-installed, and not only that, but they come pre-configured for your security. So you can use all of them knowing that there's not going to be any leakage in who you are or what you're doing to the internet. It's very secure. Everything is kept nice and separated in the Tails operating system. So a great program with a lot of different stuff loaded. So a pretty sweet way to go about having online security and anonymity. So that's the basics of some of the Tails software. We didn't dive too deep, and that's only because it's not going to be too useful. The programs we'll be focusing on the most are pretty much the ones in the favorite area, which is the Tor browser. We'll get a little hands-on with iStuff. The Pigeon Messenger we'll go through, and then actually using this PGP area, the PGP applet. You'll want to manage keys and everything like that. So we'll dive into those a little bit later. But for now, if you feel like you have a good understanding of all of this stuff, go ahead and move to the next section of the course. In the next section, we're going to be talking about the Tor browser and onion routing, get you familiar with that, and then we'll actually dive into using the Tor browser on this Tails desktop. And if you have any questions about Tails, again, I suggest that you head to this Tails website and then just go to their documentation. Their documentation is very good. You can see there's a lot of different stuff in here, whether it's talking about connecting to the internet, chatting with Pigeon and OTR, or using iStuff, or if you the first steps for setting up or actually downloading and installing, the encryption and privacy tools they offer. everything like that. So a lot of good stuff on the documentation on Tails. If you have any questions, I would head here first. I'm knowledgeable in Tails, but asking questions to me, there's some of them I just won't be able to answer. Because I know how to use the basics of Tails for what I need and what it involves with the deep web. Not an expert, and not many people are, so I would trust the expert, which is the Tails website and who runs Tails. I would definitely trust them over me. So if you have any questions, head here. Otherwise, you can see. If you can't ask me, I'll give it a shot and see if I can't get some knowledge for you. But if you're comfortable with Tails and comfortable with the applications, go ahead and head to the next section so we can talk a little bit about Tor and the Tor browser. Now that we've gone through the basics of the Tails operating system and learned how to install and use it, it's time to dive into learning about Tor, the Tor browser, Tor proxy, how to use it, and why it is useful on the dark web. This video, we're going to give you an introduction to Tor, just a basic overview. And then after this, we're going to actually get hands-on with learning a little bit more about onion routing. So, of course, let's answer the big question, what is Tor? Well, Tor is best explained as a proxy and browser used for anonymous internet connection. It encrypts all the traffic you send to the internet using onion routing, and it consists of thousands of different nodes that you will connect to worldwide. And as of now, it is the best anonymity network available for people to use. That's the basic idea of Tor. If you don't understand what Tor is or how it works, I definitely suggest that you take that Deep Web 101 course. We go into a little bit more detail about what Tor is, the basics behind onion routing and onion links. Hopefully you should understand all of that, and if you do, head to the next video and we'll actually dive into onion routing and teach you a little bit more behind the scenes of how onion routing is working and why it is more secure. So we understand the basics of Tor. It's time to now finally dive into onion routing so you can better understand how Tor actually encrypts your internet traffic and how that keeps you safe from people online. To start, I wanted to show you a brief graphic. This is on the EFF website, the Electronic Freedom Foundation, I believe is what it stands for. And this is just kind of a basic overview of when you're using Tor, what actually is dangerous. So they're circled in the purple circles are everyone that can actually eavesdrop while you're using Tor. So even though Tor is secure, there are still people who can see you. Obviously, the first level of people being able to watch you is going to be hackers on your actual Wi-Fi. If they're looking at your internet or on your Wi-Fi, they can see all that information there. They can see the website you're going to, the user and password if that applies, the data you're sending, and your physical location. Then, when you actually send out your traffic, it does still have to go to your internet service provider. And from here, the police can see it, system administrators and lawyers, and they can see pretty much all the same stuff as if they were on your own Wi-Fi network. And this is why it's important to incorporate a Tor bridge or VPN as well. Once you are past that step, the actual NSA can still see between your ISP and your first Tor relay. And if they are actually communicating with somebody who's watching the exit node as well, they would have to be someone before and after the exit node, but they can share that information and then they would also be able to see you. And we'll talk about that in a minute here. The actual website you are going to, whoever runs that can see the information from you as well. So there is a lot of vulnerability points when using Tor. It is not perfect, and you can see that some of the biggest issues with Tor are things like where that NSA watch point is, how if they can see you before the first node and after the exit node, they can see what info you have, obviously any hackers on your network, your ISP, and the actual site you're going to. So there's a lot of different points of failure, and we're going to cover each one and how to protect yourself from each. Tails already protects you from that hacker side. That's actual on your network, that'll help you with that, and then it'll kind of help with your ISP, but that's more for like a VPN and things like that. So let's take a look at onion routing, kind of give you a basic understanding of how onion routing works, and then we'll go into a little bit more about the vulnerabilities. So to understand onion routing, you first have to understand how the normal internet works. For this example, we'll have to build our own computer and kind of go through the systems that are used to connect to the internet. So first, you'll of course need a computer that is running Tor. Now, it won't be running Tor quite yet, but eventually it will need to be running Tor for this example. On that computer, you'll want a network card so it can connect to the internet, and an operating system because no computer works without an operating system. On that operating system, you'll most likely have a browser installed, something like Google Chrome, Mozilla Firefox, Safari. Doesn't matter, just something that allows you to connect to the internet. And then, of course, you'll also need a destination where you are going. Now, normally when you connect to the internet, your data will go through your browser, out your network card, and then across the internet to the other person's network card. There's a lot of different information in the middle here. Obviously, a lot more happens in between these first and final steps, but this is a basic overview of what you need to know. So you can see when you're connecting like this, anyone on the destination or anyone along the way can see your network card, can see the browser you're using, the operating system. They can pretty much see all that information because slight bits of it are carried with that data that you are sending. So this is where Tor comes in really handy. So for the Tor example, you'll first need to make sure you, of course, have Tor installed on your computer. And this is the Tor proxy. This is not the Tor browser. It's important to note that for this example right now, it is just using the proxy. So we're still using a normal browser, say like Firefox or Chrome, but we have the proxy installed on our desktop. The proxy will filter all of the data we send to the internet. So the proxy follows a few steps before it actually allows us to send our data to the internet. It'll first find all the available nodes on the network, and it'll pick 3, at least a minimum of 3, and it will begin to configure them. It'll hit that next step, which it'll actually pick the entry node and establish a session key with it, or a secure key, an encrypted key. And then from there, if it goes successful, the actual circuit will be built and keys will be established between each node. It's important to note here, the exit node won't establish a key with the entry node, won't establish a key with your actual Tor proxy. They each only establish keys with each other along the way. So once that circuit is built, we can begin our first connection to our entry node, and that will actually begin the session key. So this is what verifies the connection is working and builds our encrypted tunnel to send our information through. Once the first entry node has its connection, it'll begin to build the second tunnel, the second and middle node, and it'll go through there. And then once that is successful, it'll build the last tunnel to the exit node. And once that is complete, then the data can actually be sent out. Now, this whole process of building layers of encryption is why this is called onion routing. You can see how these layers of encryption are similar to layers of an onion, and that's where it gets its infamous onion routing name. But this is not a perfect system. While there are some major benefits of it, there are some issues as well. Some of the benefits are that the entry node, middle node, and exit node all see different things. So your entry node, it can see who you are. So if anyone has control over that entry node, they can see who you are on the network, where you're coming from, and any basic information like that. And they can also see the next node. However, because there is another node after the next node, they can't see your destination. So the entry node can see who you are, but doesn't know where you're going. The middle node then sees the first node and the next node, but doesn't know any information about that. So if someone had control of the entry and middle node, they still wouldn't be able to see your destination, even though they could probably see who you are. We then have the exit node, which is the last point in this system, and it can see the middle node and your destination, but luckily cannot see who you are or where you are coming from. This is why onion routing requires a minimum of 3. Any less, and this system would be broken. Now, 3 is kind of the perfect number. They try to not have more than that as it adds more points of failure. So 3 is usually how many nodes you will be connected to when using the Tor browser. But like we talked about before, this system is not perfect because you can see there's no encryption between the exit node and the destination. This is why you have to be very careful when you're sending any personal information, anything like a name, an address, or if you even log into your personal Facebook, anything that can identify you personally, who you are, or if you use any of the similar services and log in with the same account, it basically destroys your anonymity and your privacy while using Tor. That's why this last point here is considered a snoop point. And this is why we send information like a personal address or your name or anything that could identify you. That's why we encrypt it with PGP encryption. That ensures that at that point, if anyone sees anything like that, any data, they can't actually understand it. It's also important that you use websites that have that HTTPS encryption. So you'll notice on the address bar of the website how it's all green by the front of its name, the HTTPS. That just ensures there's end-to-end encryption. So that would also be a good way to ensure that your data can't be seen or understood by somebody who is snooping maybe between that exit node and the destination server. There is another vulnerability with Tor. Notice how in this example we weren't using the Tor browser, and this is where failure can occur as well. If any websites have Flash Video or JavaScript or any other thing that requests different permissions from your computer, it will circumvent the Tor proxy and still leak information about you. It's usually DNS leakage, so they can see maybe your IP or where you're coming from or the actual operating system you're using, or notice that you're using the Tor proxy. They can see a lot of different information. This is why it is very important that you use the Tor browser and the Tor proxy. It protects you from things like traffic leakage, prevents you from being found out or breaking your anonymity. So that is the basic way of how the onion routing system works. It's not too terribly complicated. We could go way more in depth about the encryption and how it actually establishes the keys and how it connects and how it builds the circuit. But you don't really need to know all of that to have a good understanding of Tor. It's important to understand these systems because you need to know where you are vulnerable at any point in the process. That is the whole point of using the deep web and using this course. If you want to purchase things off of darknet markets, you do not want to have any information leak or be caught, because that is your right as an internet user. So it's important to understand the steps involved, and so you can mitigate your risk at every opportunity given. So hopefully you have a better understanding of onion routing. You're going to take a little quiz after this to test your knowledge, and then after that we are going to dive into installing Tor on Windows and Mac machines. We're going to be focusing on the Windows desktop, but I'll give you a rundown of the Mac as well. However, in this course we're going to be using Tor almost exclusively on the Tails operating system. So it'll look the same and generally feel the same, but if you want to be using Tor correctly, I strongly suggest you use it on the Tails operating system for the remainder of this course. Head to the next video to get started on that, and if you have any questions, be sure to message me directly. See you in the next one. Now it is time to discuss getting Tor onto our computers. Now if you're using Tails, you'll already have Tor configured and installed, which is why we prefer that you use it on the Tails operating system. However, I'm going to show you the basics of installing it on Windows very quickly. Mac is very similar. You should know how to do this, but we'll go ahead and just run through it really quickly. So we'll hop over to the desktop to do that. And back on the desktop here, we have a browser pulled up, and we'll go ahead and just navigate by searching Tor. And it should give us some information here. We'll go ahead and hit this torproject.org. That's where Tor is actually going to be found. And then from here, we'll just navigate to the download area. Once it pulls up, we'll just go to download. You could just hit that giant download button as well. And it should automatically detect the browser you're using. In this case, I'm using Windows, of course. If it doesn't detect the right one, be sure to hit the links accordingly. We'll go ahead and hit download so it can start the download. And once that begins, we'll go ahead and save it and then let it download. And I'll be back once that is done, as it will take a minute. Now that that download has finished, we'll go ahead and open it and then just run the program. And the rest of this should be pretty easy to understand. Of course, we should select our language. We'll go with English, and where to save it, we'll go ahead and just install it there. If you want to see more details about the install, of course you can. and we will let it do its thing. Shouldn't take too long to actually install. While it is installing, it's important to note here they also have a lot of documentation on Tor on the torproject.org. So if you ever have any questions, I would go to the documentation. This is where you can read a lot more about bridges and nodes and how Tor works and security vulnerabilities of Tor. I would actually look under the Tor wiki. Would be a good place to start. A lot of good stuff under there as well. But if you have any questions about Tor, this would be the best place to look for any answers, and you can contact them directly if needs be as well. But we should go back to our download here. Looks like it's just finishing up. Here's that Tor wiki we were just talking about. A lot of different info here on installing, configuring, and different things for it as well. It also mentions Tails because Tails is a super useful tool, and again, you should be using it with Tor, but wanted to make sure everyone can get it on their computers and practice along with us regardless. So we'll go ahead and run the Tor browser since it is now done installing, and we will let it boot up. And while that Tor is booting up, we will head over to our Tails really quickly here and just take a look at the Tor browser on here. Now, of course, it is pre-installed, which is great, but we do want to use it on here really quickly just to show you how to boot it up. So you can just go to Applications and then Tor Browser, and it will take a second to boot, especially with all these things running on my computer. Definitely not the best for speed. You can see the Tor browser on the Windows system has booted up. All you want to do on this screen is hit connect, unless you do need to use a bridge or something like that, which we will go through how to configure in the next few lectures here. But go ahead and just hit connect, and it should begin connecting to the Tor network, establishing those encryptions to the nodes and everything like we talked about in the last lecture. And Tor finally booted up here, so we can see some basic information. You'll notice one of the first things they kind of mention is if you actually make the Tor browser the whole size of your screen, there's a warning there saying that maximizing the Tor browser can allow websites to determine your monitor size, which can be used to track you. We recommend that you leave your Tor browser window in their original default size, which is this size right here. Good security suggestion there. And other than that, this is basically Tor, not too much to it. It looks pretty similar. If we pull up our Firefox, you'll notice it looks pretty similar in the way it's actually built and the way it is designed. And that is because it's based off of Firefox, so they just took Firefox and made it a lot more secure. So we'll go ahead and go back to our Tor here, and that's pretty much it for Tor and downloading it. Now it did boot up on our Tails, you can see here. So we can go ahead and do that. Of course, the same message will come up if you maximize the size, so always best to just leave it smaller if you can. The Tor browser comes with a few neat built-in features, but we will talk about that in the next lecture, so go to that next lecture to actually get a basic overview of some of the features in Tor, how they work and what they are used for. You should have Tor finally installed and configured on your computer, whether you're using a Windows, Mac, Linux, or the Tails desktop. Hopefully you have Tor up and ready to go. In this lecture, we're going to take a look at the nuances in the browser compared to most browsers and what makes it more secure. So we'll hop back over to our Tails desktop to take a look at that. Now we have the Tor browser pulled up and ready. One of the first security things we saw was this maximizing Tor browser warning. We can just hit OK on that. Just be sure to watch out for that. Once you do hit OK, it usually doesn't come up again. It probably will on this because it gets erased, but on other computers, if you don't see it, just be sure that it still matters, even though it might not warn you every time. So one of the first things we want to point out in the Tor browser is this onion over here. Now this onion is the bread and butter of what Tor is, the onion routing protocol, and it actually shows you your circuit for the site you're connected to. So like we talked about in our onion routing lecture, you see here our entry node, which is based in Denmark and that IP, and then we have our middle node and then our exit node as well. Now one of the cool things about Tor built in is you can hit this new Tor circuit for this site, and what it will do is actually switch up your middle and exit node. It'll keep the same entry node, but it'll change up your middle and exit node. So we'll go ahead and hit that and let that load. And once it is done loading, we can actually take a look at the Onion one more time and see if it successfully changed those. Now, they may be based in the same country, but they should have a different IP, of course. And you can see our Denmark entry node still there. But now we are going through Romania and Russia for our middle and exit nodes. So pretty cool feature. It's suggested to do that every now and then when using the same website, just to better anonymize your traffic. But there's also another setting over here, just the new identity setting right here. And you can go and hit that, but what that will do is actually change your entry node. So it'll change everything. So what it'll do is if you hit it, it'll give you a little warning that it is going to close all the windows and then reopen them. Oh, and we accidentally just hit no. Try that one more time here. We'll go ahead and hit yes when it boots up, and then it will shut down our Tor browser, reload the pages, and this time we should have a different entry node. And again, it can be based in Denmark where it was before, but it should definitely have a different IP. So we'll let the Tor browser reboot up. We'll go into our Onion over here, and you can see we are still out of Denmark, but if you compare the IPs, I'm sure they would be different. And then you have a do middle and exit node as well. You can also check some of the security settings of Tor. Now these are very basic settings. It's either high, medium, or low, not much in between. And this is useful for a couple reasons, but it's of course the most anonymous way to do it would be browsing on the high security setting. However, this is not the best for a couple reasons. The biggest one being that on most websites, they depend on a lot of this stuff that Tor will disable. And if that is disabled, you know, the website may not work properly, or you'll see severe glitches in the way things operate. So for your normal browsing on the internet, if you're just trying to be more anonymous, just kind of browsing around, you can definitely have it on a lower setting because you don't need it that high. However, if you are in a country that censors your internet or blocks you from accessing certain sites, I would definitely keep it on the highest setting. That way it keeps you more secure and anonymous while you are browsing online. But otherwise, for normal browsing and things like that, you could keep it on low. So we'll go ahead and cancel out of that. And that is generally the Onion routing settings. Over here, you'll see another option that has a little S with an exclamation point, and that's just scripts. So things that basically ask your browser to execute different commands to look up different stuff or pull different information from places. So we'll want to usually have that forbidden. So you want to hit this forbid scripts globally option. And then now it will forbid scripts, and this may cause some websites to function differently as well, so you'll have to be aware of that. But if you hit this, we can go to the options tab here, and under here you'll see a lot of different security options that you can kind of fine-tune your experience with Tor. Now, it's not suggested that you mess with most of these. These are a little bit more advanced unless you know what they all mean and what they actually do to your browser. I wouldn't go around changing these. Overall, this is good to just leave alone this whole area. You don't really need to mess with it. It's pretty good the way it is set right now. But there's a lot of different stuff in here if you wanted to browse around and take a look at some of the things that keep you secure. But other than that, that's generally the Tor browser. Now, nowadays, Tor browser does still have a ad blocker built in, which is pretty nice. And then on top of that, you have your normal web browser settings. So Firefox has the same browser settings. A lot of different stuff in here, of course, your history and your preferences. Another thing to note, Tor doesn't save your history by default. Every time you close out of it, it's all going to be gone anyways. So that's really the interface of Tor. Nothing new there if you took that Deep Web 101 course, but it's always good to get a refresher and get a good understanding of some of the tools we'll be working with. In the next video, we're going to show you how to set up a Tor bridge and how to actually use Tor with a VPN. And then after that, we will have one more lecture on Tor nodes before diving into Bitcoin and how Bitcoin is important for the dark web. So go ahead and head to the next video to learn more about Tor bridges. In this section, we're going to be talking about using Tor bridges and using Tor with a VPN you might already have. We're going to be going more in depth to the Tor bridges part. For a VPN, there's not much to talk about there. We'll show you the basics of what to do, but it's not anything special there. So we'll hop back over to our desktop to take a look at the Tor interface and start using and configuring our Tor bridge. So we are back on the desktop here, and before we dive into using the Tor bridges, I wanted to preface with talking about why you would even use a Tor bridge at all. For some people, it's pretty much useless. If Tor is not really blocked in your country, or you don't otherwise have blocks from your internet service provider or censored connections or anything like that, you won't really need to use a Tor bridge. All a Tor bridge is really useful for is for countries that actually block Tor or Tor services, or block the certain websites or things like that. So even if you're using Tor, maybe it's still blocked if you're going through an exit node in that country. So basically, you have to be aware that these Tor bridges are very useful, and the reason they work is because at the beginning we talked about in our Tor relay section of the course, we talked about how before your computer connects to the internet and sends your data, the Tor will pull a list of all the available Tor nodes. So the bridge nodes aren't actually available on that public list. So if a country is blocking Tor, the Tor network, they'll usually just block the whole list, because anyone can access that list from their Tor browser. So they could just access it and block it in your country. But that's why the bridges are useful, because they're not actually blocked. They're not in that list, so they can't be blocked. Now, some people will still try to block them or find other ways, in which case you'd have to find other alternatives. But in most cases, your bridge will be available. So the first step, of course, is we'll want to open up our Tor browser. I still have it saved here on the desktop, so we'll open that up, and we'll let it load. So when Tor boots up, you should see a Tor network settings screen. If you didn't actually see this screen, what you can do is, while you're starting up Tor, we'll start it up one more time, you'll actually see a little dialog box come up, and you want to hit the open settings option. You have to go pretty quick depending on your internet connection. Sometimes it connects really fast. Usually it will come up like in the corner of your screen. So if you just watch here, you might see it come up here in a moment, and we'll hit the more settings or open settings option. And you can see it popped up here. You want to hit the open settings before it finishes, otherwise it'll just load up Tor normally and you won't get to actually configure the settings. So what you want to do on this screen is, obviously usually you would just hit this connect button to connect to Tor, but we want to actually configure a bridge, so we'll hit configure, and then it will ask you, does your internet service provider, your ISP, block or otherwise censor connections to the Tor network? You want to hit yes, and then go next, and then it will bring you to the Tor bridge connection screen. So before diving into this, you'll want to actually grab some information about the Tor bridges. So over here on our Firefox browser, I have it opened on the other screen, I navigated to bridges.torproject.org. If you head here, you can actually see a list of active bridges. So we'll want to hit this option here to actually see the bridges, option number 2, get bridges. And then we'll actually show you step number 3, which kind of guides us through how to do it. So we will go on to here, and it can give you some more advanced options depending on certain things you need. Generally, you won't need to mess with those. We can just hit the just give me bridges button. It'll give you a little CAPTCHA to put in. This just stops bots from accessing it, so we'll put that in. Forgive me if I do not get this right the first time. Did them in all caps. It's usually not case sensitive. Maybe it is this time. 2XUDQN maybe. Let's try that out. Hey, we did it. So you can see here it actually gives us our bridges. Here are your bridge lines, and you might be like, what is this? I don't understand. So we'll go back to our other tab that actually shows us how to use it, and that basically actually is just down here. So we'll just read from this one. That'll do just fine. And you can see it'll say we did this, select yes, then click next. To configure bridges, copy and paste the bridge lines into the text input box. So we'll do that, and you can see these are our 3 nodes that we would normally connect to in Tor. So you hit that, go here, just enter custom bridges and paste. You could also select the connect with provided bridges option and just select the type you would want. Go recommended if you're not sure what these different ones do or mean. You can read a little bit about them, but we won't dive too much into that. We'll stick to the custom ones though. Hit next. And does this computer need to use a local proxy to accessing the internet? Now this is where you would actually use something like a VPN to connect. And even though I say VPN, VPN and proxy aren't actually the same thing. This is actually more of a proxy setting. A VPN would be something you have connected on your computer already. So you could connect through Tails or something like that, which of course will show the setup in Tails as well. This is just the Windows part so far. But basically, if our VPN, like on here, I already have a VPN connected. You can see your private internet access is the VPN I use, and I'm connected through California right now in the US. And using Tor with that VPN, I'm already connecting to the VPN first and then the Tor network through that VPN. But this is a proxy, and a proxy is a little bit different. A proxy doesn't actually encrypt the traffic you send. It just puts you in a different spot so your ISP doesn't see where you're connecting to. So it can help hide the fact that your ISP looks at you connecting to the Tor network. So in this case, we'll just say no because we don't really need proxy settings. But if you did, you would just have to hit this yes option, hit next, and then you'd put in your proxy settings, which you should know if you've signed up for a proxy account. But we'll hit no in this case and just hit connect. And then it will establish the connection. It may take a tad longer connecting to the Tor bridges because it has to configure them and all that and connect to them. So we'll just let it connect, and hopefully it should get through that pretty quickly here. And it looks like it did, and it should actually pull up our Tor browser if everything was done successfully. And perfect. It looks like we're connected just fine. If we go back and look at our Tor Onion button here, we're not actually on any site. We'll just go to Google. If I could spell Google, we'll go to google.com, let it load, and then if you look at our list here, it'll show we're connected to our bridge, and then Germany and Canada. And that's pretty much it for bridge settings. This is using the Windows machine, though. I want to show you how to actually set this up on Tails because that is very important. So we'll load our Tails really quickly. That'll be in our virtual box. I'll close this because we don't need it hogging up memory. And we'll get our Tails all booted up. I've already shown you this whole process, so I'm going to go ahead and just pause the recording for now until the Tails desktop is ready and booted. Alright, looks like our Tails is finally ready to go. I wanted to note, before you actually boot up Tails on your computer, especially if you're using a USB, be sure to get some of this Tor bridge information. Write these down if you can on a piece of paper, or just have them otherwise with you. That way you can actually keep them because you won't be able to look them up or anything like that when you're using Tails. So if you have Tails booted up, you'll just want to hit the More Options button like we talked about before. Hit forward. You can skip everything else. The only thing we care about is right here, that this computer's internet connection is censored, filtered, or proxied. We'll hit that and then just hit login. So Tails finally did boot up here in our window, and it should automatically come up with the Tor network settings upon launch. And then generally the process is going to be pretty much the same. So you'd hit configure here, you'd hit yes like before, hit next, and then you'll actually need the Tor relays information, which we just have in this tab right here still. So we can go ahead and just type that in. Don't believe the copy paste thing will work. Nope, it was worth a shot. Number lock on 192.36.31.177:47516. And then that is pretty much all you need. Now you'll notice on these ones it has this big old long thing after it. You don't actually need that to log in with it, but we will put 3 of them. Actually, we'll just put that one. We'll hit next. Does it need a proxy? No. And then connect, and it should go through the process of connecting to the bridge network and getting your Tor browser up and running. So it's a pretty easy process on the Tails side as well. Now I wanted to note one more thing about the bridges before we actually get off, so we'll let that load and I'll just go over to this other tab. It's important to use, this is kind of the how-to page, but on here it talks about a little bit about if Tor is dangerous, what you should do. So obviously you always want to start Tails in the bridge mode, and you also should use the obfuscated bridges, I think that's how you say it, and they're harder to identify than other bridges. You can read a lot about that on here as well. And this is pretty much going to be the best option for you if Tor is blocked in your country. A lot of people don't have that, but some people do, so it's important to know if it does for you, and then what you need to do to actually get past that. So you can see all you would really have to do is have your same IP port, and then you just put the transport information in there. It's called a pluggable transport. Now if you wanted to use a VPN with Tor, you would actually just have your VPN running normally. So like on the Windows computer, how I have the VPN here, obviously if I use Tor on this computer, then it's going to the VPN and then to the Tor network. And then as for Tails, you can use a VPN. Although it's important to note with VPNs and Tor, I mean, it's really not that necessary. Tor is already very safe. Using it at its highest security settings will do okay, and then we'll give you some other security tips later in this course. But I wanted to mention it because a lot of people ask about VPNs and Tor. Generally, you're not going to need to use a VPN with Tor. If you're using your Tor on your computer, a VPN is not a bad idea, but really, if you have a bridge, that's almost better than a VPN because Tor is already going to route your traffic like a VPN would and encrypt it like a VPN would. It won't route it like a VPN, but it will encrypt it like a VPN would. And you're still just as secure and just as safe. So you don't really need a VPN with Tor, and if you want to actually use it or you really think it's necessary, you can go ahead and definitely look up. There's plenty of information online about how to get that going, but other than that, you don't really need to use a VPN. So if you feel comfortable with Tor bridges and understand a little bit more about that process, you can head to the next lecture. We will give you a brief overview of Tor nodes, kind of what they are and how you can actually set one up and run it from your own home. So we talked about how nodes are actually the hops in between you and your destination. There's at least 3. You can actually run those from your own home. You can't run an exit node. It would most likely be an entry or middle node. Exit nodes require a little more than just basic settings. So, but for the first node and second node, you can set that up and run it out of your own home if you have extra internet speed you're willing to sacrifice for the usability of Tor. So head to the next section if you want to learn a little bit more about Tor nodes. So we have just about wrapped up our section on Tor, but I wanted to talk about one last thing before we switched on to the next section, and that is Tor nodes. Tor nodes are a pretty cool thing that you can actually run on your own. So like we talked about, those Tor nodes are what actually handles all the information and data that goes through the Tor network, and you can actually run your own from home. All you need to have is Tor installed, and you need to change just one thing. So we'll head back over to our desktop and I'll show you how to get that going. Now we have our browser pulled up here, and we are actually on the torproject.org. And on this website, you can go over here on this left-hand side to Expert Guides, and then under there, you can go to Configuring a Relay Graphically. And this is a pretty easy-to-follow guide that'll help you go through the process of setting up a Tor node. Now, the process is actually very simple. All you would have to do is edit a torque file, a file that comes with Tor once you install it, and all you have to do is open it and add these following lines to it. So we will go ahead and just copy those if we can, and then we'll get to our torque file. On here you could just use the Cortana and just search torque. How many R's and how many C's? T-O-R-R-C, there it is. So it's right there, and I just went ahead and right-clicked to hit Open File Location, and it's already pulled up here. And then you can hit this and say Open With, and you'll want to open with your Notepad or any other text editor you have. And then you can see all the information here. And you can see it has our bridge information that we put in before. And then we can just actually at the end here just go ahead and copy-paste right there, and then that's actually all you need to do. All you have to do after that is save it, and once it is saved, you'll be running a Tor node. Now you can read some more information about Tor nodes and running it, and you can actually set up your node to be a bridge and things like that all on this page. We won't go too in depth on it. That's something for a different course. We actually will be focusing in another course on building a Tor node with a Raspberry Pi. If you've never ever seen those tiny little computing devices, we're going to learn how to build a Tor node on that, but that's for another time. For now, if you're interested in running a Tor relay, just take a look at this information on the torproject.org. And again, if you have any questions when it comes to the Tor proxy or the Tor browser, I would visit this website because they have a lot of documentation and information for you that is all very helpful. If you feel like you have a good understanding of Tor and are ready to move on to the next section, be sure to go to the next video. In the next section, we'll be talking about Bitcoin, a very, very important part of the dark web because almost all payments go through Bitcoin on there. So you'll learn a little bit about that, how to get a wallet, and then how to purchase some anonymously. So head to the next section to learn more about Bitcoin. Welcome to the third section of the Ultimate Deep Web Guide course. In this section, we're going to be talking about Bitcoin, an integral part in the deep web and darknet process. If you ever want to purchase anything on darknet markets or ever want to purchase any products or services, Bitcoin is going to be the way to do it. So in this section, we're going to be talking about how Bitcoin operates. You should have a basic understanding already. You should know a little bit about the Bitcoin ledger and how Bitcoin actually gets turned into real money and everything like that. If you don't, I would strongly suggest you take that Deep Web 101 course that is offered as well on deepwebacademy.com. But if you feel like you have a good understanding, then let's go ahead and continue on. So as you might already know, Bitcoin runs off of a few basic processes that kind of makes up the whole way the system of Bitcoin works. Those three processes, those three major things that run Bitcoin are the blockchain, or the idea behind the blockchain, Bitcoin mining, and then public and private keys, and that's for verification of like ownership and things like that. So let's dive a little bit into each one and see how they're important to the process. It's important that you pay attention to this and to understand it because for your security in the future, you'll want to know where you're vulnerable in the Bitcoin process and why using things like a tumbler are pretty necessary, especially when purchasing things on darknet marketplaces. So the first point we're going to talk about is the actual blockchain. Now, a block of Bitcoin, a blockchain, or the blocks in the blockchain, consist of three major things, and that's buyers and sellers keys. So like we talked about the private and public keys, the verified hash signature, and then the whole transaction just verified and signed off. And basically, once all three of those things are done to a transaction, it's put in a block and it's considered done. And this is how the blockchain is actually made. Once that transaction is verified, the block is locked, and then it is put into place. And then the next transaction of Bitcoin comes along. Say somebody traded a piece of pizza for Bitcoin, they would make another block, and it would also go into place and be verified, and so on and so forth. And this is how we get the idea behind the blockchain, because they are chained together in succession, starting with the first ever block continuing all the way down the line. Now, these blocks aren't actually verified only once. They're actually verified 3 different times at a minimum. So after each one is verified, it's verified again, and then one more time, and then it's considered done and completed. Now, this whole process of verifying a transaction, of verifying the sellers and buyer and seller keys and making sure they are the actual owner of the Bitcoin, verifying the hash signatures so that the transaction is actually real, and then putting it in the chain, it takes computer power. That takes a lot of processing speed to do these things. So this is why people will donate some of their computer to help with this process. There's no central Bitcoin computers that run all of this. It's just people who donate some of their processing speed to help this transaction. So those people who help donate, they basically help give one of those 3 verifications to the actual transaction. And because they are helping verify it, they are given a little something for it, which would be just some Bitcoin. Now, you don't get a whole Bitcoin just for verifying something. It's a lot less than 1 now, but you can still make a little bit of Bitcoin by mining it, although nowadays there are large mining farms and things like that which get a lot of Bitcoin. So it's definitely a competitive area to be in, but that's the idea behind mining. And really, that's the whole process of Bitcoin. We could go way more in depth about how Bitcoin cryptography works and how it actually verifies signatures and how the hash signatures work, but we don't want to dive too much into that. I just wanted to give you a basic overview. It's important to know what mining is, and that's just kind of really giving part of your computer to verify some of these transactions. And then it's important to know about the blockchain and how, any transaction done with Bitcoin is publicly available to everyone. Everyone can see that transaction. So this is why you have to be careful with what you're using Bitcoin for, because everyone can see who it went to. And say someone's specific wallet ID, they're known for being a drug dealer, maybe they were cracked down on and their wallet was compromised. If you were ever shown giving to that wallet, sending money to that wallet, well, someone could assume you were actually buying something illegal, and then they might want to look to track you or otherwise monitor what you do online. So that was just a brief overview of how Bitcoin works, the kind of processes involved with Bitcoin. If you have any more questions about that, there are plenty of resources online to learn more. But if you're feeling comfortable, let's move to the next video where we're going to talk about Bitcoin wallets, the importance of them, and how to get your first Bitcoin wallet. The next important thing to talk about in Bitcoin is Bitcoin wallets. You can't have any Bitcoin without having a wallet to store and hold your Bitcoin, so they are very important to be able to use and actually create. So in this lecture, we're going to go through creating a wallet. And we're still going to be using a Windows machine for this portion. However, we'll talk a little bit about Tails and how to get a wallet on there as well. So we're going to hop back over to our desktop and get that started. So back over here on our Firefox browser, we've pulled up a quick Google search of Coinbase, which is a pretty popular Bitcoin wallet. There are a lot of different ones out there, so we're not going to go through all the different ones and the benefits of each. You can do some research on that, on what you want. But Coinbase is one I use pretty regularly to purchase Bitcoin. Now, this would not be a wallet I would use to store my Bitcoin, but it is a pretty useful wallet in terms of purchasing Bitcoin, because some wallets you can't actually purchase Bitcoin with, you can only store the Bitcoin. So for this one, it's pretty good if you want to actually purchase Bitcoin, and we'll go through that process really quickly. So of course, if you don't have an account, you'll need to sign up. One thing to note with Coinbase is you do need to verify your identity in some way before they will let you purchase Bitcoin, so you'll have to upload like a photo ID and link a bank account as well. But if you have that ready, you can do that. Otherwise, we'll talk in the next lecture about purchasing coins anonymously, so you can kind of ignore this part if you don't want to purchase without giving away info. So if you don't have an account, I would suggest signing up. Otherwise, I'm just going to go ahead and sign in really quickly, and I will skip to when that is done. So now we are logged in and we have everything here. Once you're actually on this screen, the process is pretty simple for purchasing. All you would go is to this buy and sell option, and then you would actually just specify how much Bitcoin you want and then purchase it. Not a very difficult process at all, and that's pretty much all you need to do at this point to purchase some Bitcoin. So that's it for that Bitcoin wallet. Pretty simple. Pretty easy to use. But one of the wallets we're going to talk about other than the Bitcoin wallet is Electrum. Electrum is a very useful wallet, and this is actually the one that comes built in with Tails, so a pretty good system. And you can see there's things other than just online wallets that you can use. This one will actually download onto your computer, but like that last image showed on the other screen there, you can actually put it on a USB and see how much Bitcoin you have on there and things like that. So we'll go ahead and download Electrum real quick, and I'll show you the process of creating a wallet through it. We'll go ahead and just download the standalone executable, and of course if you're on other operating systems you can download it there. And we'll hit save the file and just let it download, and we will wait till that is done. So that download did end up finishing. We'll go ahead and just hit the executable file and run it, and then it should just run our Electrum. And we will let that boot up here. Now when Electrum pulls up, you won't get something that looks like this. This is only because I already have a wallet, so it just automatically logs into that one. So if you do get something like this and it's empty, or you're at the basic startup screen, you're basically just going to create a new wallet. And you can go ahead and name the wallet. We'll just name this one Test Wallet and hit OK. And we'll go next here, and we can select what type of wallet it is. We won't go too in depth about the different types of wallet. A lot of information about them. You know, a wallet with two-factor authentication is going to be super useful. That way, you know, you don't just put in a password to get in it. It's going to be safer. Multi-signature wallet's pretty good as well. They all have different benefits, but we'll just go with the standard one for this video. So you hit next. And if you already have a seed you want to use, you can hit I already have a seed or create a new one. Now a seed is a random set of words that you will remember to actually get your wallet back from any computer. So you can download Electrum on another computer on the other side of the world, and as long as you know your seed, you can actually log into your wallet. And that's the same with most wallet applications. So we'll hit next, and then it'll create our wallet. Now it will give us our seed. We'll make sure to copy that. It's suggested that you do not keep this seed anywhere on your computer or any electronic devices. I wouldn't even write it down. The best way to do this is to memorize this seed, but you're going to have to keep it somehow. In this case, we'll just keep it in a notepad for now. Once it is done, keep that there, and then you'll hit next. And it's going to ask you to retype your seed in there so you can actually verify. Now if we tried to copy and paste, it should work out, but you can see if the seed is not right, even if you try to put one letter different, you'll see the next doesn't light up, but if you put it right, the next will show up. So we will hit that, and then it'll prompt us to put in a password. You can put in any password you would like. For this one, I'm just going to use a standard password I use for most things. And then we'll definitely want to encrypt the wallet file as well. That way if anyone gets a hold of your computer, they can't get your Bitcoin wallet. We'll hit next on that, and it will begin to create our wallet addresses. So basically wallet addresses or Bitcoin addresses are just ways for people to send money to your specific wallet. So you can have several connected to one wallet. Electrum makes a few for you, and that is how you actually send and receive money. So that is it. That's basically the process of creating a wallet with Electrum. Now if you wanted to receive cash, this is the address you'd want to send Bitcoin to. Now you'd want to copy this, and actually you could take this over to Coinbase. We don't have it open anymore. Once you purchase Bitcoins on Coinbase, you'll want to actually send it out of Coinbase to a different wallet, and you would actually use this process to do that. But we'll go a little bit more into how that all works in the next section. So in the next section, we're actually going to be diving into purchasing and how to purchase anonymously before we get a little hands-on and actually transferring those coins to darknet marketplaces. So if you're ready to learn a little bit more about that, head to the next video. So now that we've touched briefly on wallets and how to actually get a Bitcoin wallet, it's time that we talk about how to actually purchase Bitcoin anonymously. This is a very important topic in this course because buying things off darknet markets is largely what the dark web is used for. So if you want to use darknet markets and actually purchase products, you're going to need to be able to purchase your Bitcoin and transfer it anonymously without it being linked to anything that identifies who you are. So if you do want to purchase anonymously, there are a few different options you can explore. The first one I have pulled up here is actually called Bitcoin ATMs. Now, Bitcoin ATMs are very useful because it's usually cash for Bitcoin or a card for Bitcoin, but it's still fairly anonymous. The cash for Bitcoin is going to be the best option though, and some of them do it, some of them don't. It just depends on which ATM is near you. And this is a good website to actually find some of those ATMs. It's coinatmradar.com. So you can see they're all around the world, a lot of options for different people. Unfortunately, if you're located like in India, mostly the Middle East area, you're not going to find as many. But there are definitely, if you're in the US or even the United Kingdom or most of Europe, you will have a lot of different options there. So this would be something that's pretty useful to find. I'll go ahead and just take a look at some of them really quickly just to show you kind of what they look like. They all do different things, so it's important to note you can actually filter based off of what coin you want. So if you just want Bitcoin, you can go ahead and do that. We'll do just ATMs. So usually it can be an ATM or a teller. A teller would be like a cashier. You give them cash and then they print out a receipt with a seed or a wallet number that you basically put in to receive your money or something like that. So let's see here. So now it's just pretty much Bitcoin and then ATM. And if we zoom out, you can see there's a lot less options for just Bitcoin ATMs. Not that much less actually. But it's good to know all of these things as well if you ever use EtherDash, Litecoin, Dogecoin, anything like that. Good to know about and good to know how to use. But that's a pretty useful option. Definitely a go-to, kind of easier than any other options for anonymous buying. But you can also go to what's called localbitcoins.com. Local Bitcoins is basically getting Bitcoins person to person. Usually you have to do some sort of like cash deposit like it shows here as some sort of like Wells Fargo or a credit union or just something like that. So not a very difficult process, but usually when doing those cash deposits, it does require some sort of identification. So not the most preferred way, but you really just have to see through here. They take them a bunch of different ways. They always will accept different forms of payment. It's not always cash. Some people do different stuff than just this. And as far as your anonymity, this one generally is going to be the best way to go. The Bitcoin ATMs are pretty good too, but of course these locations may have cameras or things like that. So it's these tiny little things that could leave a trail that could lead to you. So you just are looking for the most secure possible, and usually cash to Bitcoin is going to be the safest. But those are the two main ways to actually purchase Bitcoin anonymously. I'm not going to go through the whole process through here. I mean, it's pretty straightforward. You can go to these sites and follow the information, and there are plenty of resources online as well to learn more about this. I didn't want to dive too deep into it because that's not really what we're focusing on in this course, but you should definitely be familiar with it, and if you do want to purchase things from darknet markets, you want to be able to know how to do this and get it anonymously. So hopefully that gave you a better understanding of purchasing Bitcoin anonymously. And that'll pretty much wrap up our Bitcoin section of this course. It was a little shorter than the other sections, but that's because most of this information is very widely available, so there's no reason to go over what you could find on a quick search anyways. If you have any questions, of course, you can look around online or just ask me directly. Otherwise, head to the next section of the course to get hands-on with PGP or Pretty Good Privacy, and learn how to send messages that are encrypted so other people can't read or understand them. Before we wrap up our Bitcoin section of this course, I wanted to discuss with you tumbling Bitcoin. This is a very important process if you ever plan to actually purchase products on the darknet markets. It's not necessary if you're just using your Bitcoin for normal things and legal things, but if you do ever plan to use your Bitcoin for illegal or illicit things, you'll need to be sure you're familiar with tumbling, as this is the best way to make sure you're purchasing things anonymously. So of course buying anonymous is important, but there can still be some paper trail led back to you, which is why you want to make sure you use tumbling. The process of tumbling is fairly simple. You will take your coin from a normal exchange like Coinbase or local Bitcoins, and then you'll put it on a normal wallet based on like a Windows or Mac operating system, preferably Electrum. And then you'll go to your Tumbler, and then you'll go to your Tails wallet, so an Electrum wallet you created on the Tails operating system, and then of course to your market. Now this isn't the definitive guide. You of course could switch the steps for Tails wallet and Tumbler, which is what we will do later in this course. We'll actually show you the exchange to a normal wallet, to the Tails wallet, and then tumble it before going to the marketplace. The order isn't as important as it is the idea of tumbling somewhere in between to help anonymize your coin. It's important to note that the Tails wallet in this situation is kind of like a one-off wallet. You don't want to send coin back from the market to that wallet, because then that would further increase your risk of being found out or not secure. So the preferred tumbler we will be using later in this course is the Helix tumbler. You can find that through the Graham's link on deepwebacademy.com/links. We won't go into the details of using it now because it would be pretty repetitive, but we do go through it in the final purchasing process, the last video of this course, where we go through the entire process of actually purchasing a product on darknet markets. So you can read up on tumbling, or you can see the attached document to this video to read a little bit more. There's a lot of info about tumbling, why it's important, and how to do it best. But we won't get hands-on with it until the end of this course. It's important that you know what it is and why it is useful, but that is all we will talk about when it comes to tumbling for now. So at this point in the course, we have gotten through talking about Tails, we've talked about Tor, and we have talked about Bitcoin. And now it is finally to introduce you to a new topic, which is PGP. PGP is a very important concept when it comes to the deep web, as if you ever want to send any information about yourself you will need to make sure it is encrypted. That way no one can understand it. So you should have a basic understanding of PGP already if you took that Deep Web 101 course. If you haven't, I would strongly suggest you take that, as we're not going to dive too much into how PGP works or how the key system actually operates. So if you don't think you have a good understanding, take the Deep Web 101 course. Otherwise, let's continue on. So first, let's answer the big question, what is PGP? PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy, and it is a form of encryption. It's used to encrypt files, text, emails, documents, drives, and so much more. And it's the closest to military-grade encryption you can get. It is a very secure encryption and very useful. But why would you even need to use it on the deep web? You might wonder that, you're already using Tor, so you're pretty safe. You're already using Tails, so why do you also need to use PGP on top of that? Well, like we talked about in the Tor section of the course, there is one spot where your data is not actually encrypted, and that is that exit node right here. So if somebody had control over that exit node, or if somebody had control over the destination, if you send any information like your name, your address, or anything that can personally identify who you are, you lose all your anonymity and security. And this is why PGP is very important. Now, it's not just useful for if you're sending information over that point, because snoop points can happen along the whole route of the Tor process. Each node, if it is compromised, could cause a lot of issues, and any information, again, like your name, address, or anything else, could be read and understood by somebody who has control over those nodes. Now, this is obviously something you would want to avoid, because any information given about you or that can be told about you is going to limit your security. Now, there's a lot more security steps to talk about throughout the rest of the course, but that's the basics of PGP. If you don't understand how the system works, again, take that Deep Web 101 course and at least take the section on the PGP, understanding PGP. It goes through the process of explaining the key system, the difference between a public and private key, and everything like that. So be sure to take that course. Otherwise, in the next video, we're going to show you how to set up PGP on a Windows or Mac machine, and then we'll talk about using PGP on the Tails operating system. Alright, in this video we're going to go ahead and discuss how to use PGP on Windows and Mac machines. We're going to be focusing more on Windows, as most users of this stuff are on Windows machine, so we won't go through the Mac process, although I'll show you which software you should be downloading at least to get you started if you are on a Mac. Otherwise, we'll go back to our Windows desktop and take a look at the tools we will need to use PGP encryption. So we have our browser pulled up again, and we have navigated to gpg4win.org. Now, this is a very useful tool for Windows for PGP encryption, and this is the tool we will be using to actually encrypt our files with PGP. So we'll go through the process of downloading that, but I wanted to mention on the Mac side, you can use the GPG suite. The GPG suite is also very useful, and it does have documentation that can walk you through. It's a pretty easy process, creating a new key pair, things like that should be pretty easy. So you'll have to actually take a look at that if you would like. Otherwise, continue on using this one for the Windows. So we'll close out those two things. And then we will begin to download GPG for Win. So go ahead and just hit that giant download button on the home page. We don't want to donate. You can if you would like. Otherwise, you can just skip this method. So hit 0 and download, and it will begin the download. Of course, we'll want to save the file, and once it is ready, we will pull it up. So the file has just wrapped up downloading, so we'll go ahead and hit the execution button, and we will select yes and go through the process of installation. To start, we'll select English for the language, hit next, hit next. We do want to install all of the default programs. You can install GPA if you want, otherwise just ignore it if you're not sure what that is. Hit next, pick where it saves, of course, and then if you want to add it on your computer anywhere specifically, but we'll go ahead and just install. It shouldn't take too long to install here, so we'll go ahead and just get through that process. And once it is finished downloading, go ahead and hit next. and then you can actually view the README if you would like. We're just not going to do that for now, and hit finish. Now it is done. Now you'll realize when this installs, it's obviously not just one program. It'll install a couple. Cleopatra is one of them, and there's a few more. GPG for Win. It comes with a few different things. So you can see Cleopatra and then some documentation and things like that. So what we will actually do to start is we will open up Cleopatra. And this is how we're going to actually create our first key pair for the PGP program. So you obviously need to create a key pair just to get that started. So once Cleopatra pulls up, it'll look something like this. Now, like mine, it'll most likely be empty because you haven't imported any keys yet. So you can start by going to File and then New Certificate. And it will ask you if you want to create an X.509 key pair or an OpenPGP key pair. Obviously, you want the OpenPGP. And then you'll have to put in some basic information. Start with your name. So I'll just put my name and then email. For the email, I'll do this one. And then any comments if you want. You know, you do need a name and email, and this is why it would be useful to also have an anonymous email. There are a lot of deep web services that offer anonymous email, but there's a lot of regular internet services that offer anonymous email as well. But it will be connected to your keys, so if you don't want to show your identity at all, you might want to add an anonymous email. There are some advanced settings that you could go to. I wouldn't mess with any of this unless you know what you're doing, but this just changes the type of encryption we're using. But we can go ahead and hit next. We can review it here before we can continue, and we'll go ahead and hit create. And then the keys are now being created. It will ask you for a passphrase. For the passphrase, you will need to put something that is secure. So obviously if I tried to put like a test, that's not going to be real good. You want that quality to be as high up as you can. So I have a go-to password I use that is pretty secure. So we'll go ahead and use that. But be sure you're using a secure password, uppercase, lowercase, with numbers and special characters as well. We'll hit OK. It'll ask you to re-enter it again just to confirm, making sure you entered it correctly. And we should be good. So now it is creating the keys. As it shows here, you can go ahead and just start typing in this field to help create it faster. It went pretty fast, so we didn't need to do that. But if you type, it just helps make it. It'll use the timing in between your keystrokes to help create the encryption. But that's pretty much it. Our new key pair is created successfully. So at this point you would need to back up these keys or at least keep them in some way. You can send it to your email or just make a backup. We'll go ahead and just make a backup. The output file, you can choose where it actually saves to. So we'll just go ahead and save to our desktop for now, although remember you have to keep these safe if you can. We'll name it PGP keys, and you can actually throw on some encryption over that as well, but we'll go ahead and just hit OK. And it says it was successfully exported. So that is the process of creating the keys. Pretty simple, but that's not everything we want. We obviously want to be able to send a message, so how would we do that? Well, once we have our file done and downloaded onto our desktop, our actual certificate, what you will need to do is actually, so say you want to encrypt to somebody else. We'll use that as a first example. I delete that because this actually, I saved our certificate again really quickly. Now if you open this, you can actually find your public key block. So this is what you would send to somebody. This whole thing, you would just send that to somebody if they wanted to send a message to you, and they would just use this and then send it to you. But for the most part, when it comes to using PGP for the dark web, we just want to send a message to somebody, usually with our address or something like that. So what we will do is we'll pretend this is their key. So what we'll do is maybe we'll change it, a few letters in it, just to make it not quite the same, but it should still work. Then we'll go ahead and we'll save it again, but I'm going to change the name of it really quick, test key. And then what we actually will do is you want to save it as all files, and then save it as the extension GPG. Then hit save, and that will finish there. And then now you have their key, so this is whoever's is you want to encrypt a message to. So if you actually want to encrypt your message to somebody, you'll first, of course, need this key. And then what you want to do is import that key to Cleopatra. So we'll pull up Cleopatra, and then we'll go to import certificates, and then navigate to where that certificate is at. You can see our test key here, and then click open, and it should be able to import it. Obviously it's just going to import it as me because it was already mine, but if it wasn't, it would be there already. And then what you'll want to do is you'll want to save your message you want to send to this person. So once we have imported that certificate onto Cleopatra, what you'll now want to do is actually create another text document, and this one you'll want to save as your message you want to encrypt. So this could either be an email or some other text file, but we'll just do a text file for now, and then say this is a test encryption, and we will save that, and then we'll go ahead and copy it, and then go back to Cleopatra, go to clipboard, and then encrypt, and then you can add your recipient, in this case me, hit OK, and then hit next, and it will encrypt it, and you will be done. So once it has succeeded, just go ahead and click OK, and then you'll actually notice under here, if we go ahead and just paste now, save to our clipboard, if you paste, it's actually the message now encrypted. So this is this text right here, but now it is encrypted, and all you would need to do is copy this and then send it to whoever you wanted to. So it's a fairly simple process. Again, the overview would be to get the person's key. You would want to import the certificate to Cleopatra, then you can get any text you want, copy it, and then just go to Cleopatra and hit encrypt. You can go to there, to the tray, or you can go to the clipboard up here. And once that is done, if you paste again somewhere, you'll notice the encrypted message. So we have it again. We'll do it one more time just to show you. So again, copy the test encryption, go to clipboard, encrypt, add the recipient, hit next. It says it's successful, so we'll go back to our clipboard, and you'll notice if I paste, now it is an encrypted message. So that's pretty much the process of encrypting a message to somebody using PGP. Now you may want to actually receive messages yourself using PGP. I'm not going to dive into it in this video because we don't really need to use that throughout this course. If you want to learn more about that, the documentation comes with GPG4Win. So if you go ahead and I have that pulled up over here, if you download that, you'll notice there's a lot of information on here. They go through pretty much everything you would need to know when it comes to encryption. Looking for that index, there it is. I mean, they go through a lot of different stuff about, encrypting emails and inspecting certificates, signing emails, encrypting files, all of that. But we don't need to go too far into that because that's not too necessary. If you want to learn more about this stuff, of course, visit the web. There's plenty of resources on PGP. Otherwise, in the next video, we're going to continue to learn about PGP. However, now we're going to use PGP on the Tails operating system, which is the best place to use the PGP encryption software. So the process of encryption on Windows wasn't too difficult, but now it's time to get into the PGP process on Tails. And surprisingly, it's not going to be very difficult either. It's actually very similar to the Windows. Might actually be a little easier to follow as well. So be sure you have Tails ready to go, or at least watch this section. Again, if you have Tails in a VirtualBox, this is great for practice, but remember, any changes you make on that Tails, the second you shut down your VirtualBox machine and boot it back up, it will be gone. And same for Tails from a USB. If you don't have persistence configured, it will erase everything you do. So if you save any keys or create any keys, they'll be gone if you don't save them. So it's best to have persistence if you're going to be using PGP keys a lot. Otherwise, I would just export them to like a USB drive and go from there. But let's hop back to our Tails desktop and take a look at PGP on Tails. So we are back here on our Tails desktop, which is in our VirtualBox environment. Now the PGP information for Tails is pretty much all going to be right here on this little clipboard. This is where you'll find all the things you need for the Tails PGP application. So the first thing you'll need to do is make sure you have somebody's key. So again, we're going to be assuming you're just wanting to send a message to somebody or encrypt it to somebody else. So you will need their public key to start. Now I've already saved that test key we were working with before. I've saved it to the Tails desktop. But we'll just open that up and take a look at it really quickly. So we'll do open with, and then we'll open it again with our text editor. And it should open up just fine. And there it is. So you can see it just looks like a regular key block. And this is what you'll actually find online when you want to encrypt something to somebody. So we will go ahead and just get that out of here for now. And the first step you'll want to do is actually import that key so you can copy a message to it. So you'll click this and then go to Manage Keys. And that little clipboard there has several options you can select. Obviously, encrypt, sign in, encrypt, manage keys, or open the text editor. But we'll just hit the Manage Keys. We'll hit File, then Import. And then, of course, you'll want to select the file you want to import from, which will be this one. We'll hit Open, and it will verify their email. And then you can just hit Import, and it should pull it through just fine. Now, once it is imported, if you go to your GNU PG keys, you'll actually see it there. So this is the one we just imported. And there's some other test ones down there you can take a look at, but that's the one we care about. So now you would want to create your message. You can do it in that same file. I'll just create a new text document actually. So whatever message you want to actually send to somebody. So in this case, say you were sending an address, 123 Main Street, north, south, in Westernton. It's fake if you couldn't tell. And we'll also add a name as well. Test, a unique name for the parents to give them. We got our address. I should have capitalized those, but it's too late now. And then our zip code, 12345. No, that's not right. There we go. There it is, and that's pretty much it. So you would copy this information. You'll hit this little clipboard and then say sign or encrypt clipboard with public key, and it will pull up an option, and you'll select who you actually want to encrypt it to. So it'll pull a bunch up. I don't know why it keeps pulling empty ones up down here. Now it would pull up the key we imported. However, earlier when I messed with that, remember I changed some of the letters in the last video. That's why it wouldn't actually show up. But if it was, you would just hit this, hit OK, and then that would be it. It would encrypt the message the same as before. And then of course, once we pasted, after that it would be fine. But that's pretty much it. That's the process of encrypting something. So obviously if you paste it, it will paste as encrypted. And that is pretty much the process of encrypting with PGP on Tails. So there's some more information on here you can use. If you want to find any more information, you can actually pull up the Tails website, and they give a lot of kind of step-by-step on what you need to do to actually send the message and everything like that. And you'll just go ahead and paste it after you are done and you're ready to go. So it's a pretty easy process, nothing too difficult. If you have any questions, I suggest visiting this website, the Tails website. Lots of information on that. But that is pretty much the process of PGP on Tails. It's not too terribly difficult, and that'll pretty much wrap up our PGP section. It was very quick, but we got through pretty much everything you need to know. Not too much information we need to dive into. The important section is going to be the next section, and that is section 5, where we will talk about marketplaces and how to actually use products and services on the deep web and how to purchase things anonymously. That'll kind of bring everything together throughout this course. You've probably been wondering, we kind of skip some things or we don't really dive into them, and that's because in the section 5 we will walk you through the entire process from start to finish of anonymously purchasing a product on the dark web. So we have finally made it to the last section of the Ultimate Deep Web Guide. In this section, we're going to be talking about darknet marketplaces. They are the most popular thing on the dark web. This is like 80+% of what the dark web is used for. So throughout this section, we're going to be showing you how to actually navigate the markets, register for them, and then actually the whole entire process of anonymously purchasing products from darknet marketplaces. This is what this entire course has built up to. The last two sections we have kind of breezed over the content, and that is because we'll be using it a little more in depth in this section. The rest of these videos will be done on the Tails operating system, as if you ever want to purchase anything on the darknet marketplaces, it's necessary you use Tails. So we'll be using Tails throughout the rest of this course, and hopefully by the end you have a good understanding of how to use the deep web. So we're going to hop back over to our Tails operating system to get started. So we are now on our Tails desktop here. So the first thing we want to do to actually find some of these deep web markets or darknet markets is you want to actually, of course, open up Tor. And it will take a second for the Tor browser to load, so we'll just let that get nice and ready for us. And then we will go ahead and continue on. So our Tor finally did boot up, and what we want to do is there's a lot of different places online to actually get links for darknet marketplaces, but we're just going to go to, so to actually grab those links, we're just going to go to deepwebacademy.com/links. And then on this page we'll find some links for some marketplaces. And of course there are plenty of resources online to find these marketplaces, so you can go ahead and look around for that. Now, because my security settings are on high, it'll actually block some HTML data, canvas data. We'll just go ahead and allow for now. But of course, if you want to block those on this site or any site, go ahead. But you can see right here some darknet market links below. These are the 5 popular ones, not necessarily in order of the most popular. Alphabay definitely is number 1 though. That is one of the most popular marketplaces. So we'll go scroll down. It is very laggy right now. Tor's just trying to pull it up. So we'll just go to Alphabay, but you can see a bunch of different links. I mean, you can browse around to the different marketplaces, see what you like about each one. A really good website that kind of gives a good marketplace chart is deep.web.com. And then we'll navigate to there really quickly, and I'll show you that chart on there. They go a little more in depth on what each site offers in terms of security and what they offer in terms of vendor bonds, and if you want to become a vendor. And in a different course, eventually we'll talk about actually selling products and creating dark web websites. But for now, we're just focusing on the marketplaces. So we'll let this pull up. It'll take a minute, so I'll just pause the video until we're navigated to the right page. So deep.web did finally pull up, and I actually went to the markets chart button right here at the top. You can just press that and then scroll down, and you can see there's a lot of different things they rate markets on. So they obviously give you a link, whether it's open registration or it's invite only, so like referral only. If they have multi-sig, which is used for multi-sig Bitcoin wallets like we showed earlier, if they've ever had security issues, any active warnings, a commission you would make off of sales, vendor bonds, so how much it actually costs to be a vendor, so how much you have to give just to be a vendor. 2FA, which is two-factor authentication, so you don't just log in with like a password, you log in with a password and maybe verify PIN or something like that. Forced vendor PGP, so that means they force them to use PGP to receive messages, that way your information is encrypted. Finalized early allowed, so that means that the money you send to the seller will get the money before you might actually get the product. So some allow it, although you can choose whether to have that or not. The type of market it is, ratings and reviews, you can view those on the site, and then when it was created as well. So this is a great site with a lot of different links for marketplaces. So if you're looking for more of a wide base to take a look at and actually explore, I would check out the deep.web darknet market comparison chart. Otherwise, you can just grab a link from Deep Web Academy as well. We have a few on there. So I'll go ahead and click the first one for Alphabay, and it will open up in another tab. And this should be the Alphabay login screen. Now, of course, you probably don't have a login already, so you'll need to register. Just hit register, and then we'll go through the process of registration. So you'll start by entering a username. For this one, I'll go ahead and just enter. So you just need to enter a username. For this one, I'll just do my name, a password, preferably something super secure. If you have any secure passwords, then you'll have to confirm the password again. Then you need to enter a 6-digit PIN. This is very important that you remember this because you will not be able to get your Bitcoin if you forget. So we'll go ahead and do that. There's that. Now you can enter a login phrase as well, and then the user that invited you, if there was anyone. You can put in Deep Web Academy there if you want, but otherwise you don't have to. Then you can add other profile information if you have a website, a Jabber, AOL, anything like that. And then you can actually put your PGP key here as well. And that's on that desktop. You would just have to open up this, which has my test key in it, although it's not quite right. It's a few letters off, so I won't throw that in there. But you would just open it up, copy it, and then paste it. Close out of that. And then the last thing you need to do is enter that CAPTCHA, R6EWLUF. I think we can all agree on that, right? And that time it should go through. Yep. So it'll come to another screen that'll give you a mnemonic. Some sites do this, sometimes some sites don't. This site does it because you do get a Bitcoin wallet with your account, so they try to keep it very secure. So definitely try to remember this if you can. You can see right here, be careful if you lose it. You cannot remember, your account will be reset and you'll lose all your Bitcoin. Very important to remember that. So we'll go ahead and just copy that, and then we can just paste it as well. But type it in might not hurt you as well. Either way, we'll hit continue, and it should be set. It should take us to our dashboard, and then we will navigate around the dashboard. So this is the Alphabay dashboard. It looks a little different than some other dashboards. Alphabay did just recently start taking Ethereum as well as Bitcoin. So that's pretty useful. You can use a couple different coins, not just one. Up here is a ticker for the Bitcoin current price, sitting at just about 2,000 USD. Not bad. Definitely hit that record yesterday, I believe. But this is pretty much it when it comes to the home page. There's a bunch of options you can set under your profile settings. If you hit on your name, it'll show you kind of your public profile, what other people would see, and then gives you some settings you could change as well. So you can add in all the information. You can sell stuff if you have sales or orders, a lot of different things to go through. We're not going to go through all of them because they're not all too important. You can change your PGP key or your PIN as well. But that is pretty much it there. So this is pretty much the website. It's very intuitive, not too hard to actually go around. If you want to actually take a look at the current things for sale on the site, you can just go up to the home page, just hit home. It'll load that up, and then on the left hand side you'll see the actual categories of different things. So you can browse the categories. You can see counterfeit items, drugs, jewelry, gold. Be aware that most of the things on here, I would say at least 80% or more, are usually illegal or illicit. And that's not just in some countries, that's most countries. This is going to be illegal. So just be aware of that. And pretty much from there you can browse around and see anything you would like to find. There's a bunch of different stuff on here. A lot of information, and eventually you will find something you may want to buy. So in this case, say you're looking at these Xanax pills and this is what you want. Well, you're not sure if they're good. There's reviews on the vendors and things like that, but you're not really sure. So what you can do to actually verify things like that, we'll show you that in the next video, how to actually verify vendors and make sure that you are being safe. Besides the actual website reviews, which aren't bad, there's another way to do it as well. So I'll show you that in the next video. So if you're comfortable with marketplaces, have a good idea how to register, how to navigate, head to the next video to learn how to verify vendors. So at this point, you have Tails up and running, you have a darknet market you've registered for, and you found a product you want to buy. Before buying it, you should probably verify if who you're buying it from is actually a safe seller. You don't want to get scammed, you don't want to get arrested or otherwise compromised in your security. So you need to make sure you're verifying the vendors. And there's a great tool to do this, and we're going to hop back to our Tails operating system to show you what that is. So back on our Tails desktop, we have the Grams search engine pulled up. This is the tool that is very useful for finding products on the darknet marketplaces. Now this link you can find through Deep Web Academy or that deep.web. It's everywhere. Just search Graham's search engine if you want it. So this is just the search engine portion, so you could search different things that you may want. So like our example over here, we had Xanax. You can actually search Xanax straight into here, and it will pull up results searching different marketplaces. So it won't just search Alpha Bay like this one is. It'll search across the board and find the best ones, the top one here, and then the best down. And you can see, I believe this one is it's not quite the same, actually. It's a little different. So that is a good way to find different products you might be interested in, but some vendors might not be verified or might not have reviews. So you'll want to actually verify the vendor to make sure they are who they say they are. So we will go back up here, and the tool you want to use to verify vendors is called Infodesk. So the Graham's Infodesk. So we'll just open that up in a new tab. While that's loading up on here, you can actually see different stuff like market status, market alerts, market charts, different things like that. Very useful tools if you are interested in the markets. And then you can also take a look at Helix. Helix is a Bitcoin tumbler. We haven't talked much about that, but it's a way to help anonymize your Bitcoin. We'll be talking about that in the next video. Go through the entire purchasing process. But we'll go back here to the info desk, and then here we can actually search the name of our seller. So let's go ahead and go over here, and we will get the name of our seller here, which is Dr. Elisa. So we'll go back over here and just type that in. So we'll do Dr. Lisa and then hit enter. And so far it only scrapes reviews from the biggest markets right now, Alpha Bay, Braxis, and then they're going to be adding another one soon. So it's important to note that they're not, it doesn't search all of them, but this is a good way to verify ones on like Alpha Bay. And you can see it'll come up with everything they sell. So you can see they sell a bunch of different stuff, and then you actually can go to the vendors page right here. And this is the actual vendors file, so it shows their PGP key, shows where they're at, and this vendor actually doesn't have any reviews on Alpha Bay, so you can leave a review if you use them or have tried them. Otherwise you need to find some more information. There's some Reddit postings about them as well. Do not order from him, some people say, so you know, maybe you wouldn't want to. We'll go down to the market reviews, no market reviews as well. So that's really it for verifying vendors. It's not too hard of a process, but it's important to do before you purchase, because someone like this you might not want to purchase from. There might be better vendors of the same stuff that you might want to purchase from instead. So this is a good tool to verify vendors. In the next video, we're actually going to go through the entire process, start to finish, of actually purchasing a product. So this whole course has been leading up to that. So if you have any questions about that, you can head there. Otherwise, if you have any more questions about this, definitely take a look online. Reddit's a great resource for information about these kinds of things. So you can go there to find out more info. Otherwise, head to the next video. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the final video in the Ultimate Deep Web Guide. In this video, we are going through the process of purchasing a product from the deep web. This video is a culmination of everything we've gone through in this course. We've broken it off into sections, learning it, but it's now time to bring it all together so you can see the entire process. To start out, we'll be on our Windows desktop, and then of course move to our Tails environment when we need to. So before we dive into the Windows desktop, I wanted to cover one important issue, and that's the issue of security. Security is very important when purchasing stuff from darknet markets, especially if they're illegal or illicit in your country. So you want to be sure you're doing a few things. At this point, you should already be using a non-personal computer. If you are not, if you just want to trial run the process like I am on the Windows desktop, you can do that. But if you're actually going to purchase, you want to make sure you're using a computer that you don't use all the time. You'll also want to be sure you're using the Tails operating system through USB. That is the recommended way. SD card and DVD work, but the recommended way is USB. And then you should be using open public Wi-Fi. Now, you don't necessarily need to use open Wi-Fi when initially buying your first Bitcoin and things like that and downloading Tails, but to actually transfer the Bitcoin and actually purchase the products, you want to make sure you're on an open public network. Good examples of those are coffee shops, maybe even libraries, things like that. So throughout the rest of this video, we'll show you the rest of these security steps. We'll want to make sure we're using our Tor bridge, so we will set that up. We want to be sure we're purchasing our Bitcoin anonymously, and we'll show you that process. We'll go through tumbling Bitcoin and how to transfer it to darknet markets. We'll verify our vendor, and then of course we'll purchase our product and use PGP encryption to send the information. We'll go all the way to the final step of hitting submit and actually purchasing. I'm obviously not going to be purchasing in this video. That's because using the Tails operating system on Windows is the best way to record, but definitely not the best way to purchase. So I don't want to mess around with anything like that. So we'll go ahead and jump into the video. We'll hop back to our Windows desktop to get started. Back on our Firefox browser, we've opened up the Coinbase website to actually purchase our initial Bitcoin. Now, I'm going to use Coinbase for this video. However, for actually purchasing anonymously, you want to be sure you're using local Bitcoins like we talked about before. This is the best way to do it anonymously, but I wanted to show the process on Coinbase. Coinbase isn't horrible, but definitely not recommended. This is the best way to get secure private Bitcoin, but this way it leaves a lot more name identity, because to this account I have my bank account linked and also my government ID, so it's a lot more vulnerable in that sense. But if you're wanting it anonymous, be sure you're using local Bitcoin. So if you're on the Coinbase application, which is, in my opinion, one of the best web-based Bitcoin wallets you can use, you want to just go ahead and go to the buy and sell option. And we'll go Bitcoin, and then we'll choose our method of payment. Those are blurred out for security reasons. And then, of course, we'll choose how much we want. For the amount of Bitcoin I want, we're going to do whatever is around, oh, that's USD, not Bitcoin. We're going to do whatever is around, I believe, $50. We're just going to stick to that. So $50 USD is about 0.021 Bitcoin. So you can buy it instantly. We'll go a little less. We'll go 30. Why not? Bitcoin's a bit expensive right now. I'm not looking to buy it. It's at 23, pretty high. But we'll go ahead and buy this 31 just to keep it small. They'll ask us who we want to confirm. We should get it instantly to our wallet, which is awesome. So we'll go ahead and confirm the buy. And then we'll go to our dashboard. And then it'll say it's bought. It's going to take a minute for it to actually come through to our wallet. But we'll go ahead and go to our accounts page to take a look at our wallet. You can see my wallet right here. We'll click on that. And then you will see that it came through, and our Bitcoin should be in our wallet. Now, what we'll want to do after this is actually set up our wallet on this side of the machine. So we don't want to be using it on the web wallet, and you definitely never want to take it straight from the Coinbase wallet to something else like Tumblr or anything like that. We'll want one step in between, or actually two steps in between. So we'll go to Electrum on this computer and actually pull up our main Electrum wallet. And our Electrum has finally pulled up. Took a minute to actually get it all up and running. You can see some basic transaction history here, nothing crazy. And some of you might be worried, hey, why is he showing this? Wouldn't people be able to find out info about him or what he purchased from this? Maybe you could, but again, all of this info is publicly available to everyone, so it's not like showing this does me any more damage than it already being out there. So we have our Electrum up. Now we'll want to send Coinbase money to our Electrum, so we'll go to the Send in Request tab, and then we'll need to get our receiving address for this one. So go under Receive. You can just copy that whole address, or you can just hit this and it'll copy it too. Put that in here, and then you specify your amount. So in this case, we'll do 0.012, and then we'll actually do 27, because there will be a small network fee accrued for this. So we'll do our Bitcoin wallet. There's a little bit in our Ethereum wallet, but we'll stick to the Bitcoin wallet. That went away. 7. Okay. Optional message if we want. I don't have a message, so we'll go ahead and do this. And it actually did give an error, and you'll see because of this network fee, it just is a tad too high above our wallet amount. So we'll actually just lower this, maybe go to 1.19. How about that? So that is close, almost just a little over 1.175. There we go. That's a little less than our balance. I'm looking at the total here because that network fee, that transaction fee, and this network fee again this is how miners make money. So this is how the people who help verify these transactions actually make money by you give a little fee to them. So we'll send the funds. Now that everything looks good, it'll ask you to confirm. It will ask you to confirm, so of course we'll confirm that, and it will give us confirmation that the send is complete. Now we can go ahead and go back to our Electrum wallet, and you can see it already has it in there, just $11, and it's just waiting to confirm it. So we'll just wait for that to actually confirm the rest of our Bitcoin, and then we'll continue from there. So once we send the Bitcoin, it will go to our balance on our Electrum wallet, and we are ready for the next step. So for the next step, we'll want to get our Tails operating system booted. So I'm going to go ahead and pause the video until that is all ready. And again, you should be doing this step on a non-personal computer with their Tails off of a USB, but this is just a trial run on the Windows desktop, so we'll go ahead and boot our Tails and take a look at that. So once you have Tails up, the first thing you're going to want to do is actually go to the More Options button. And then you can add anything else you want, but we just want to make sure we have the setting for creating a Tor bridge on. So we'll go ahead and hit login. And that way, once it actually comes up, we can configure our Tor bridge accordingly. So we will let the desktop load. Once it comes up with the desktop successfully, you'll want to, of course, configure your Tor bridge. So we will go ahead and configure that. Now, before you actually got on Tails, hopefully you got your Tor bridge information down. For me, I'm just going to be using the Tor bridges over here. I have them on a Firefox browser, obviously pulled up. So I'll just go ahead and put those in. But does it sensor connections? You say yes, and then you will add your Tor relay, which I'll go ahead and paste. Tor bridge relay, I'll go ahead and paste that in. So assuming we did everything correctly, we will hit next. We don't need a proxy, so we'll hit connect. And then it should begin to connect to the Tor network. So now we've gone through the basic steps. We've got our Bitcoin, we've transferred it to a wallet that's not a web-based wallet, it's our own wallet, and now we have the Tails operating system, and it'll be loading Tor with a bridge, and an obfuscated bridge as well to keep it more secure. So once Tor is up and running, the next step is to actually tumble our Bitcoins. We've talked a little bit about this already in the Bitcoin section, the process of tumbling and why it's important. So we'll go through that. And then after the tumbling, we'll actually transfer to the marketplace and then go through the process of buying. So on Tails, once you have everything ready, you want to start by going to your applications. And then under Internet, and you should see Electrum Bitcoin Wallet right at the top there. Now you'll want to create a different Electrum account. You don't want to actually use the seed from the one on the Windows desktop we were using earlier. You don't want to use the same one because that would be an issue. So we'll go ahead and just do this. And it does warn you that, this is not in persistent mode, which means all our Electrum data will be lost, including our wallet. So we're going to run it anyways, of course, for this example, because the coin's going to go into it and then out of it. So it's basically a one-off wallet. We don't really care about it that much. So if you recall, the process of tumbling is fairly simple. You purchase the coin from Coinbase, you transfer it to a secondary wallet like that Electrum on the Windows operating system. Then you transfer it to a third wallet, and this would be Electrum on the Tails operating system. And then after that, you would transfer it to your Tumbler and then the marketplace. So we'll go with the standard wallet. We'll create a new seed. It'll take a second. That is our seed, so we'll definitely want to note that. It of course will ask us to confirm our seed, so we'll go ahead and do that. We'll just type it back in from before. And it's good to go. We'll hit next. And it will ask us to put in a password, so we will create a password and be sure you're using good technique for your password. Remember, mixed number, letters, and special characters. Let me reconfirm that one. And it will generate our addresses. And we have our wallet. So once it pulls up, we would actually at this point go to our other wallet, which is right here, and we will send this Bitcoin, and we'll pay to, we obviously need to get our receiving address for this one, and it hasn't fully connected yet. We'll wait till it does that. And at this point, once you have your wallet up on Tails, you would then want to transfer the coin from the wallet we had over on the Windows desktop. We'd want to transfer that over. Of course, in this situation, there is an issue with Electrum in the VirtualBox environment. It actually has issues connecting. So what we'll do is we'll just go straight from this account and actually to the Tumbler. Although the best practice would be actually transferring it from your other Tails, from your other Electrum account to this one, and then going to the Tumbler. We're going to skip that step just because this has connection issues when in a VirtualBox environment, which we're still running. So we'll skip that for now. We'll assume that step was already created and this is actually that wallet. After you get that coin to your wallet on Tails, you would then want to begin the process of tumbling the coin. To actually tumble the coin, we'll want to open up the Tor browser. So you'll want to go to Applications and then the Tor browser right there. The next step in the whole purchasing process is actually tumbling our Bitcoin, so that's what we're going to do now. We're going to first navigate to the Bitcoin tumbler, we're going to send our coin to it, and then of course send our Bitcoin to the marketplace wallet that we have. So we'll let the Tor browser load up and we will come back when that is done. Once Tor is loaded, we will go ahead and navigate to deepwebacademy.com/links to grab our link for the Grams browser, which will also lead us to the Helix Tumbler because they're connected, owned by the same group of people. So we'll load up this links page really quickly. And then once it is loaded, we'll go to the popular Onion sites option. And we will go ahead and just hit this first one here, which is the Grams Market search engine. And this will pull up in a different page. We can close that other page. We don't need anything from there. And I'll actually make this full screen for now. We'll let this load up. And then from the Grams homepage, you can go up to the top here and just go to the Helix option. And this is the actual Helix Tumbler. So we will let that load as well. And then once it is up, you can read through the basics of what we need to do, or what it is, I guess you could say. So we'll go ahead and just scroll down a little bit and see which Helix we're looking for. So the Helix Regular, you do need an account. The return time is 10 minutes to 24 hours, but you can have multiple addresses. So that's a pretty useful option. The Auto is about the same, but not multiple addresses. The Lite works pretty fast. It's faster, but you don't need multiple addresses either, and then the Market as well. We'll go with the Lite in this situation, just because we don't need we don't want to go through making an account and all that. So we'll hit on that option. We'll let it load, and then we have this option here. So to say Helix Made Simple, enter the Bitcoin address the clean coins will be sent to. So this address is going to be our actual marketplace address. Now, if you don't know your marketplace wallet address, you can get that by going to the marketplace. So we'll go to our Alpha Bay Market really quickly here. We'll actually have to grab that link again because I do not know these links off the top of my head. So we will hit that link. It'll open up in another tab for us. We'll close that other one. And this should bring us to the sign up page, or a login page. Perfect. So we can go ahead and log in. So I'll go ahead and do that. We'll see if we can get the caption the first time here. For some reason I can never quite get these. Alright, there we go. Let's see if it logs us in. And it looks like that worked. It got us in. So from here we'll want to actually go to our account, and once under the profile we'll go ahead and scroll down to the left hand side and hit balance, and that will actually give us our wallet address. Now, in some cases, a marketplace might not offer a wallet with your marketplace login. This Alphabay does offer a wallet with it. Some do not, in which case, if they do not, you would just basically tumble the coins and then you can send them to a different wallet. And you could kind of skip the Tails wallet. You can go straight from a Windows wallet to tumbling to a Tails wallet, and that would be it. So we'll hit that balance option. It's loading up that page. There we go. And then this is our Bitcoin address we'll want to use to deposit funds. So we will go here and we will copy that address. So of course, once we have that address, we will paste it over here and we will hit let's go. And it'll take us to the next step in the process. So what we will need to do now is send payment to this address right here. So what we'll do is we will copy that address. Now there are some notes you need to be sure of before you actually send the payment. Be sure under here you're reading these little disclaimers to avoid losing your Bitcoins. Don't send it more than one transaction, just send it once. Make sure you're sending 0.02 or more, and don't send more than 43 Bitcoins. So once you're sure of all those things, you can go ahead and go back to your Electrum wallet over here, and we'll just hit send Bitcoin. The pay to address will of course be that, oh, that's the bridge information, didn't copy it here. We'll go back up. So we'll just paste that information there, and then the amount you want to select, I've already hit it before, but we'll just hit max. And then if you want to increase the fee or decrease it, you can, but we'll just keep it at the normal amount for the fee. So that should be about it. Once you think it's all done and you can verify the address and be sure it is right, but it looks good. So we will go ahead and hit send. Now I'll need to put in my password for Electrum really quickly. So we'll do that. And it will sign it, and it should send it off. And it shouldn't take too long for Helix to actually recognize the transaction is coming through, so we'll take a look at that once it starts happening. So after just about 10-15 minutes, it looks like it's finally complete. So once it is complete, you can of course go back to your Alphabay and check your balance to ensure it went up. In this case, it did. This is a different account than I was logged in before. The other one had 0. This one had a little bit more than 0. So you can see it now reflects the current balance. So that's pretty much the entire process when it comes to tumbling your coins. So now that we got that out of the way, it's time to actually go and purchase something. So let's go over to our Alphabay. We'll just navigate back to the home screen, and we'll start looking for some products we might be interested in. You know, and you could do different ones for what you want. I'll just be looking around. We'll say we'll go to drugs and chemicals, the most popular one. Obviously, you can see the amount in that category compared to any others. So we'll just do a little trial run with something like that. And let's say we go to psychedelics, pretty popular ones, and definitely widely illegal. So just so you know, of course, this is all pretty much illegal. Oh, and actually our balance did just update. So it wasn't quite updated before. Now it is updated. I have about 0.05 Bitcoins. So there we go. We can look through here if you see anything you like. We'll stick to, let's say we stick to shrooms. All natural from the ground. And again, be aware that in some countries viewing anything like this is illegal. So it's best to be safe. But we'll go down. We'll pick this one here. So this guy's name is Trip with Science is the actual username. So let's say I've been browsing around and this looks like something I want to actually purchase. So the process from here would be pretty simple. So once we get this page pulled up, we're going to want to do a little research on the guy and make sure we're not just purchasing something from someone we don't trust. So usually it means that they're a pretty reputable vendor with Alphabay if they come up pretty high in the search results, but it's never bad to double check. So we'll let this page load and then we'll take a look at their information. So now that we see his page loaded up, you can see some basic information about the seller. Obviously you can see the vendor level and trust level. Those are pretty important, but the most important is actually the feedback. You know, this stuff isn't faked. It's actual reviews from actual people who use the site. So it's a pretty good indicator of what you can expect from the seller. Now, a lot of the times it's, of course, always usually good stuff, you know, A+ shipping, fast shipping, great product, things like that, that don't actually give you quality information about, you know, the receiving process or how the seller actually deals with transactions. So we might find some of those in there, and that's really what we're looking for. We're not looking for the ones that just say he's great. We're looking for the ones that actually kind of give a breakdown of what they experience. So we'll take a look at that again once it loads, and obviously the loading takes forever because we have this Tails in a VirtualBox and Tor in a VirtualBox, and this computer's not that fast anyway. So hopefully it loads up here in a second, and we'll be back when it does. So our review page just loaded up here. So go ahead and scroll down and you can see some reviews, pretty basic information, how fast they got it, how good the shipping was, a little more in-depth. So orders shipped, 4 extras on top of 5. It's pretty great. So you can read through these just to be sure, but another thing we showed you earlier how to use is that actual info desk. So we'll take a look at Trip with Science on the info desk. We'll go over to the Helix page because you'll have a link right there on the info desk. We'll load the info desk up and we'll actually take a look at this vendor and see if we can find any extra information that we might be missing. So we will go down here and search by username. We'll just search his name real quick. Spelled that wrong. And we will search, and it should pull up some information about the vendor. And you can see here the results. It goes across a few markets. So we got Agora, Alphabay, Evolution. They might all be the same guy, but sometimes they could have the same name on different marketplaces. But we will go ahead and go to the Alphabay one because that's the one we are using. And once it loads, you can see how many reviews this user has gotten, and then of course the star rating. So this would be a very good vendor to do business with. It looks like they're very rated well, and they have some good information, and of course you can read all the reviews on them as well. And this pulls from different marketplaces, so not just Alphabay. So you can read through these just to be sure it's something you'll want to do. But if it is and you think you're ready to move on, what we'll do is we'll pick our quantity. So in this case it's $20 for a vial, I guess, so we can hit it if we want to purchase it. Now you can purchase it with the XMR, the Ethereum, or the Bitcoin option. Obviously we want to do Bitcoin because that's what we have. So we'll hit buy now, and then it'll go through the buying process. It'll take us to our purchasing page, so you can read through all of this if you would like. Obviously there is a shipping attached to it. Any notes we want here. And as for the notes, I would definitely want to encrypt it. So this is where you'd actually put your address. So we'll take a look at the vendor's PGP really quick. We'll get his key. So it should be over here. There it is. So we'll actually copy this entire thing. Now once we have this vendor's key copied, we'll definitely want to import it so we can encrypt a message to him. So we'll start by opening the text editor. We can close out of this for a second while we work on the desktop. In the text editor, you'll want to paste what you just copied, and that's the actual PGP key block. You can see that here. We'll add the 2 dashes I didn't copy at the beginning there. We'll go ahead and hit save. It'll ask how we want to save it. We'll just name it TWS for Trip with Science, and then key so we can know what it is. We'll go to the desktop, save it there. Once it is saved, we can close out of this, go back to our clipboard up here for our PGP applet, go to Manage Keys. Then we'll go to File and Import. To actually get the key imported, we'll select this right here. We'll say Open. And you can see even his email says TWS, so we did something right. We'll go ahead and say Import. And it should begin importing the key. Now we'll go down here to our GNU PG keys, and it should be at the bottom if added correctly. And the name there is Trip, so that does look like it imported successfully. So now what you will want to do is actually get your address, because in the notes if we go back to our Tor browser, you can see over here on the purchasing page there are notes, the quantity, and then actually what you want. Now you could just hit this, say encrypt the note using the seller's PGP. You could put in your address, hit confirm, and it'll encrypt it for you. Or if you want to be sure it doesn't mess up at any point, you can go to text editor. And this is where you would put in your address, because in the notes you do need to put where you want this shipped. You could say 123 Main Street, and then city, state, zip code if it applies. And obviously at the top there, you'll also want to add name. And that's pretty much it. So what you would do is just copy that, hit the clipboard. You could say sign and encrypt clipboard with public keys. It'll ask which key you want to encrypt it with. We'll obviously want to do it for this vendor. You could sign the message as well if you would like, but we'll just go ahead and hit OK. And it will give you a warning saying it's not fully trusted. That's okay. We can just hit yes to actually do it. And then now if we paste under here, we should have our message now encrypted with his key. So you can take this whole entire message, which is already copied, go over here, and then of course you can add it right into the note. I would definitely read the information here. Sometimes they might have certain things you need to do or put in the notes that you might not know. And of course, number 5 there, it is highly recommended that you PGP encrypt your shipping address yourself. And that's what we did. So at this point, if everything was good and everything was true, you would hit confirm purchase, and it would send your coin to his wallet and begin the purchasing process. And generally, that is the entire process for purchasing things on the dark web. Obviously, we're not going to purchase that because it's a totally fake address and we don't want to waste our Bitcoin on that. So we can close these out and close that out and kind of wrap up this video. So hopefully you have a better understanding of the entire process. It won't be the exact same for every marketplace. Hansa Marketplace is a very popular one, but it's a tad different like that. Instead of having a wallet on your marketplace, you have your own personal wallet, and then once you purchase something, it'll say send your Bitcoin to this address. It'll tell you the exact amount to send, and you have a certain amount of time to send it, and once you do, it'll verify the transaction and everything like that. It's a pretty fluid process and pretty straightforward. I would of course browse around to different vendors and different things, but you need to note that most of these things are illegal or illicit, and you will be prosecuted for such. I can't be responsible for you doing anything illegal. This is just to show you how the process is done, because you know, online anonymity and privacy is very important, and it should be your right to purchase things anonymously. Whether that be illegal or not is on you, but hopefully this gave you a better understanding of the entire process from start to finish. Of course, if you have any questions, you can email me, morgan@deepwebacademy.com. Otherwise, you can head to Deep Web Academy to learn more and take some of the courses there. That will about wrap up our sections on learning throughout this course. In the next section, we'll go through some wrap-up things, some things about security, and a little bit of a disclaimer as well before this course will actually be over. So throughout this course, we have gone through a lot of info about security. Everything we talk about is related to your personal security and how to make you more anonymous and safe on the dark web. In this video, I wanted to give you an in-depth security guide. We kind of went through it when we actually went through the purchasing process, but we didn't cover everything you need to do to be sure you're being as secure as possible. So let's go ahead and dive in to how you can be the most secure possible when using the dark web. So before actually even using the dark web or even thinking about using the dark web, you really should never use your normal browser or your Wi-Fi network to search for anything like Tails, Tor, the dark web, darknet markets, the deep web, Bitcoin, tumbling, things like that that are related to the dark web. And it might seem crazy, it might seem like, why can't I ever search it? That doesn't make sense. And you know, it's been proven from Edward Snowden's release of the NSA files. It even showed how they tracked users who visited the Tails and Tor website. They didn't like track them personally, but they had maybe a computer algorithm, I believe it was, that would flag you and start to watch your internet usage to look for what you were doing. It's not a joke, it's a very serious thing, and by taking this course you've already failed that, and that's not a big deal. It's not like you're going to get a slap on the wrist for it, but just be aware that you might be flagged somewhere or on some sort of list somewhere, and what that is, no one really knows for sure, but I am sure, especially myself teaching these courses and you using it, I am sure we are on a list somewhere. So it's important that you follow the rest of the security steps very carefully, because if we are being watched, we don't want to give them a reason to actually persecute us. So we kind of missed that step, but what about the initial setup? What about setting up your computer? What do you need to do? Well, the first thing I would note is you need to use a non-personal computer, preferably something you purchased with Bitcoin or cash. Not totally necessary. If you just have an extra computer lying around and that you can wipe clean and use Tails off of it, that would work. And that brings us to our next point. You need to be using Tails and over public Wi-Fi whenever possible. It's not recommended to use Tails and Tor at your home network, because that could also get you flagged or otherwise put on some list. And we didn't discuss how to do this, but you should always verify your Tails download. Be sure you note the checksum of the download and be sure it is correct. I have linked to a guide at the end of this video. I'll show you that there's a resource after this video also that gives you a link to actually go through that entire process on how to do that. So that'll be super useful to check. And like we kind of already talked about, open and public Wi-Fi only, especially when using darknet markets. Only use the open and public Wi-Fi. On top of that, you're going to be using Tor, so you need to be using Tor with an obfuscated bridge whenever you connect. And we talked a little bit about that in the bridge section, and you can read more about that on the resources around that section as well. You'll need Bitcoin to actually purchase products, so of course you need to purchase your Bitcoin anonymously, and you need to be sure you're tumbling your Bitcoin correctly. That whole process we talked about, going through actually getting 3 different wallets and using the tumbler and everything like that. So be sure you're doing all of those things. And obviously before you purchase anything, verify your vendor that you're purchasing from. And whenever you're messaging or emailing or even instant messaging or chatting, make sure you're only using PGP encryption. Never send anything unencrypted or anything like that. It could lead to some serious security issues. So that's the initial setup, but what about actually purchasing? Well, purchasing is just some things that make sense. Obviously, you should never use a fake address or name. Sending something to a fake address just puts you at a lot of risk, and if you use a fake name but send it to your address, that also will put up a lot of flags. You need to also be sure you're ordering in small personal amounts. Never order for anyone else, only yourself, and if you're ordering any illicit drugs or anything like that, it's small amounts. On top of that, don't brag to friends or family about your purchases. No one, no exception. It doesn't matter how cool you think you are for doing it. You really should not be just going around talking about it, because you never know who's going to get questioned or who might have a big mouth and say something, and then you're getting hauled off to prison. And the last step, that's kind of this is more of a general step there, is actually when you receive the package, wait up to a week before opening it. That might not make too much sense, but I've linked to a resource on the actual purchasing guides, and you should visit that subreddit, Darknet Market Noobs. They give a lot of info on why this would be, and sometimes, especially if law enforcement is onto you, they'll put some sort of device that will go off. Will set off like a beacon or something when you open it, and then they'll actually raid your apartment, house, whatever you're living in, and they'll have the package there that you open. So if you wait a week, usually they don't have the funds, the resources, or the time to sit and wait if it's not being opened. So that's just another good step to follow. Now, this may seem paranoid, but it is really not. Like I like to say, is life in prison really worth one of these illegal things you want to buy? Probably not. And in most countries, it doesn't take a lot to get some serious sentences, and especially with this stuff. I mean, we've seen just the guy who created Silk Road, the founder of Silk Road, Dread Pirate Roberts was his name, Ross Ulbricht. He has 2 life sentences for creating a marketplace, and there's some other stuff in there, supposedly hired to murder somebody and all that. But especially governments, they do not mess around with this stuff, because they do not like that you can have this much security and be able to not be known. They don't like that, and they will persecute you to the full extent they can. So going through all of this may seem like a lot, but this is really the tip of the iceberg when it comes to security. If you want to ensure you're the most secure possible, I would check out the Jolly Roger Security Guide on deep.web.com. They have a really useful guide on there, and that guide will walk you through so much. It's actually a lot to swallow to start, but if you follow everything in there, I mean, you will be the most anonymous and most secure you really possibly could be. This guide is useful, and there's some good information in this and the resource attached to this video as well, but it's not going to cover everything you need to know to be the safest possible. So follow all of these steps and check out that Jolly Roger Security Guide to be sure you are the most anonymous possible on the dark web.